Class is in session, hitting the books, Pub Sports Radio, Monday, October the 9th. Ian Cameron, Conor Mack with you, as we are each and every Monday, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, to get you ready for college football. The early first look at the week ahead in college football. To everyone watching that's from north of the border here in Canada, I wish you a happy Thanksgiving. I hope you're enjoying the holiday here in Canada. And we're going to give thanks that I'm going to give thanks that I had a much better NFL Sunday yesterday than I did a college Saturday. College Saturday was just all over the place. Some bad beats, man. I still can't get Missouri out of my mind. Absolutely.
That was rough.
Terrific. If you were on the Missouri Tigers in that game. And there were so many games where a couple of games that just went against me late at the end, and it could have been a profitable day. Instead, it turns into a down day this past week in college football. But it's what you deal with. When you're talking betting football every week, you're going to get swings that go against you every now and then. But Missouri, it's one of the worst beats I've certainly been a part of in a while in this sport.
Saturday was pretty good for me. NFL, yeah, just killed it. Unbelievable day NFL. But Brady Cook, we talked about it. He was pretty good all day. He threw a pick, early. But, yeah, it just came back to bite him. And that was a shitty beat for sure.
Shitty beat. Talk about a game that really pissed me off too. I had Texas State, and I also had the over against Louisiana Lafayette, the Raging Cajuns, and Texas State's leading the whole game. They end up blowing it late, and the scoring dies basically in the second half, and the game stays under as well. The total was like 66, and it's 34-30. It ended up with 64 points. So just a couple of swings here and there, and it could have been a really good Saturday. Instead, it was a disappointing one. But you're right. Both of us had a really good NFL Sunday. That was by far my best NFL Sunday of the season yesterday. So good to see that. All right, let's get into the games. We've got a bunch of them here. And by the way, there's CFL, Canadian football, about to kick off right in front of me here, which is always nice to have.
During the day?
Yep.
CFL?
Eighth CFL game on Thanksgiving, and it's Ottawa, Montreal. So got a little entertainment while we do the show here in the background.
Beautiful.
We have some entertainment this week in college football because now we got weeknight college football for the rest of the season. We've got a slew of Sun Belt and Conference USA games here, part of the new television package that's been engineered with those two conferences. So lots of weeknight college football. So we'll begin with the first of 3 games on Tuesday night. Coastal Carolina taking on Appalachian State. We've got App State 6.5-point home favorites, 61.5 being the total in this game, 62 in some spots. And my first thought is, and actually this line opened 5 points with App State as home favorites. It's now been bet up to 6.5. And this is just a clear indication that really the betting markets have completely and utterly collapsed on Coastal Carolina, that people just don't think very highly of this team right now. And it's hard to blame them. They had 2 really poor performances prior to their bye week, losing 30-17 at home against Georgia State, an outright loss as home favorites. I took Georgia State in that game. And then against Georgia Southern, who's had a pretty solid season, very good offensive football team, Georgia Southern, and Coastal Carolina loses 38-28 to Georgia Southern, ended up getting picked apart by Davis Brin at quarterback in that game for Georgia Southern. So the defense has really struggled. And to be honest, look, I can't say I've totally called this, but I was really worried when Jamie Chadwell moved on to Liberty, former head coach here at Coastal, thinking he was such a big component of why the offense was great. The scheming was great. The play calling was great. The game planning was great. I ain't seeing that same stuff from Tim Beck. Sorry, I'm just not. I don't think they're as well coached, quite honestly, with Tim Beck as they were by Jamie Chadwell. And the results point that out. Somehow you've got this multi-year starter who's been here forever at quarterback, Grayson McCall, and somehow in your first year as head coach, you've managed to take an offense that's been phenomenal for these last few years, and you've made them ordinary. That's hard to do with a very experienced veteran quarterback. Now, I'm not excusing Grayson McCall of all the blame. He has to play a little bit better too, but I just don't think this is as creative, as explosive, as dynamic an offense with Tim Beck now as the head coach. I just don't think so. And it's been a problem area for Coastal Carolina. Does the bye week help? We'll have to wait and see, but this is an important game for them to try to bounce back. I know people are really down on Coastal, but to me, this does look like there's some value now on the Chanticleers. And if you're looking at laying points here, Connor, with App State, you're talking about a team that beat Gardner-Webb, didn't cover, though, an FCS team. They beat East Carolina 43-28, but, it's been a really tough year for East Carolina, a rebuilding year after how solid they were last year. And then the other results were a loss at Wyoming, which is no shame in that. Wyoming is tough at home, and they showed it again this past weekend. North Carolina, where, they ended up covering in that game 40-34, scored a lot of points, gave up a lot of points. And then their last time they played was UL Monroe, who, to be honest, they're one of the probably worst teams in the Sun Belt, and they gave up 40 points to a UL Monroe team that this past week couldn't move the football against South Alabama. So that's not a good defensive showing for App State, and that defense is what worries me here about laying almost a touchdown now against – I don't think Coastal's as good, obviously, this year, and I don't like what Beck is doing with this offense, but it's certainly a buy low spot. There's certainly some value in this number, in my opinion, on Coastal Carolina. And you are talking about a defense on the other side that I have trouble still laying points with. I'm not rushing to the betting window to say, let's take App State here after seeing them just give up 40 points to UL Monroe, one of the bottom tier teams in this conference. So I'm leaning Coastal. I'm worried about the overall direction of this team for the season and the way they've started, but they're off a bye. Do they correct some things off 2 losses? You'd expect them to bring sense of urgency here. So not overly strong opinion, but I'll give a lean to Coastal Carolina here, probably the over as well. If there's a week that Coastal can hopefully get something going with McCall in the offense, it's here against a very spotty App State D. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, and both teams, I think you mentioned, coming off the buys in this game. Other than that game in Wyoming, and there could have been more points in that game with App State at Wyoming. It ended up 22-19. There was a ton of mistakes. That game could have been in the 30s. All their games have gone over. I just thought, this total's pretty high, but I think we get points, in this game back and forth. The last few meetings, have gone back and forth too, traded wins and losses. I like App State. If I get a 7, though, I might look Coastal's way, but I've been disappointed. You talked about the Georgia State game. I faded them there in that one. They're just not the same football team as the last few years, but they still have McCall. Yeah, I lean the dog a little bit if you can get over a touchdown. I think we get plenty of points here.
And like I say, the defense has struggled here for Coastal Carolina the last 2 weeks. They did play Jacksonville State and UCLA, and Jacksonville State's turned into a heck of a team, and we'll be talking about them in just a moment. They did play Jacksonville State. They did play UCLA, and they hung in there against UCLA. So schedule-wise, they've played some good teams. And like I say, to me, this definitely feels buy low, buy low. It's screaming at you that it's a buy low spot. It's a good number. It's a value-laden number to take Coastal Carolina. I know they're not the same dominant team in the Sun Belt as they've been in years past, but I think it's a good buy low spot here on Coastal. I'm certainly rather to take points with them than lay points with them. That is for sure. All right, next up on Tuesday night, we've got Louisiana Tech and Middle Tennessee State. Middle Tennessee 3-point home favorites, 54.5 being the total in this game. It's going to be very interesting to see what Rick Stockstill does with the quarterback position here for Middle Tennessee State, because when I look at that Vadiato kid last week, it's time to, I think, sit him down. He's just a turnover machine. That's been a big problem now for him multiple weeks in a row. The turnovers have just crippled this Blue Raiders football team, just committing way too many of them. So do we see maybe DJ Riles step in at the quarterback spot? We haven't had an official decision yet in this game as far as who is going to be the starting quarterback. This is just me thinking out loud that maybe it's time to make a change here at the quarterback position if I'm Middle Tennessee State. But there is no doubt the last couple of games have been rough for them. 31-10 beat down against Western Kentucky, 45-30 against Jacksonville State, where Jacksonville State has another one of these massive second half performances and just looks like a monsoon, and Middle Tennessee State just could not stop Jacksonville State in the second half. And meanwhile, the offense, that's when they turned into just, a turnover machine, and they could not protect the football, Middle Tennessee State. So, 3 straight losses now for them entering this game, not playing great football. They've actually failed to cover 4 straight. Their only point spread cover this year was at Missouri. So This has definitely been an overvalued team. I was disappointed with Louisiana Tech. I took a bite with them at +7 last week against Western Kentucky, and they actually came back to get the push for me because they lost by 7. They had a very good second half, but they had an absolutely terrible first half. They dug themselves a big hole, and then they could not recover. Jack Turner, probably not one of his better games. I still want to see him more than I want to see Hank Bachmeier, quite honestly, as the quarterback moving forward, but definitely not one of his better games. I'm not laying points with Middle. I'm not. Right now, I can't. They're not playing well. Do I want to go back to the well with Louisiana Tech again? That remains to be seen, but it's Louisiana Tech or nothing for me. As far as the total goes, 54.5, 53.5. We've seen some shootouts with these two teams, and we've seen some low-scoring games with these two teams. So kind of feels like it's one of those games could go either way totals-wise. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, I mean, that got a shootout last week, which I didn't see. In Middle Tennessee, to be at home up 23-7 and just blow it in the second half. It looks like a totally different team, especially defensively, and you mentioned the turnovers. I think that's big for both these teams, both quarterbacks. Turner had a few as well. I think whoever, doesn't have these horrible mistakes, this team's in it. I still lean over, like, especially if this drops a little bit more. La Tech's just playing a little bit slower. They're not kind of that up and down points team last year that was definitely a dead over. They played a little bit lower to unders, but I think this could get over the total. And it's just with these bad teams in the middle, it's like the halves from one half to another. It's like, what are we getting? Because La Tech just got ripped and looked like a different team the second half, try to come back too short, and they don't get it done. But I'd be on La Tech. There's right now, Middle Tennessee, even at home, I don't think they should be laying 3 points. So I'd grab La Tech.
And if it's a body auto again, I'm probably going to move on Louisiana Tech because I've seen enough. This guy just cannot value the football. He's just making way too many mistakes right now, and it's costing his team. But again, I still got that feeling we just might see a quarterback change this week. But again, we don't know that as of this recording. All right, Liberty and Jacksonville State, the third game on Tuesday night. We've got Liberty 6-point road favorites, 56.5 the total in this game. Liberty, the first non-point spread cover of the season for them last week in the game against Sam Houston State. And look, give Sam Houston State's defense a whole lot of credit. You have to, because they actually played a really solid game. They kept Caden Salter and the very good ground game of Liberty at quarterback and the ground game of Liberty in check. And look, Sam Houston State was right there with a chance to win, driving the ball less than a minute to go. They got down to, I think, the 5-yard line, but goal line stand by Liberty. They got the turnover on downs. Sam Houston had to go for it on 4th down, and Liberty survives with a 21-16 win over Sam Houston State last week. This is really going to be probably on paper the best game on Tuesday night. These are, two terrific football teams. They've had very strong seasons so far. No question about that. Excited to see how it plays out here in this Conference USA battle. You've got 3-0 Liberty inside conference play. Jacksonville State 3-0 in conference play as well. The two teams are a combined 10-1 straight up this year. So this is a hell of a football game here on Tuesday. And I'm telling you what, though, you're going to again give me Jacksonville State in this underdog role, man. And they just continue to be very impressive. And this is coming from someone that's never been a big Rich Rodriguez guy. I've never been a big fan of this guy as a head coach, but right now their defense is impressive. They give up yards, but they get critical turnovers. They're forcing turnovers like crazy. They're taking the ball away every single week, and they're creating big plays with their defense. We saw it last week, pick sixes, fumble returns for touchdowns, you name it, against Middle Tennessee State. That Jacksonville State defense can come up with big plays and big stops when they need it. The one flaw in Jacksonville State is that neither quarterback is a great pocket passer. And Rich Rod's played both of his quarterbacks this year throughout their first few games, Logan Smothers and Zion Webb. Neither of these guys are phenomenal as far as throwing the football, but they have a terrific run-based offenses. Both quarterbacks are very, very athletic. The question is going to be, can they have that success here against Liberty's defense running the football? Liberty's given up 117 rushing yards per game, 4.2 yards per carry. Those are decent numbers. They're not great, but they're not horrible against the run. So what I did was I ended up looking at their schedule. Who have they played that can run the football? Well, they played New Mexico State. They're a balanced offense. Bowling Green's more of a team that struggles at times to run. FIU, is not a great offensive team. And then last week, Liberty played Sam Houston State. So dare I say it, they're probably going to get challenged here by Jacksonville State a little bit. I think I'm going to be looking at taking the home dog here. And again, now that we've seen Liberty fail to cover a point spread last week for the first time against Sam Houston State, kind of tells me, Connor, that maybe now the betting markets have finally caught up to this team, that they're being priced the way they should. And maybe there's still some opportunities here and moving forward to maybe go against Liberty after that scorching hot ATS start to the season that came to an end last week. They got the win, but they didn't even come close, obviously, to the cover. So, but end of the day, I'll tell you what, whether I end up moving on Jacksonville State or not, Connor, there's no way I'm going against them right now. They're a hot, confident football team. It's Jacksonville State or nothing for me here. What do you say here, C-Mac?
I think this one's going to be good. You mentioned when I saw that last week too, I'm like, okay, this is the line now. 3 touchdowns when you're not a huge school is getting out there because Liberty's just played so well. And you hit on it. I get into the common opponent here with Sam Houston between these two teams. The close game with both of them, and I think Jacksonville State's live. We talked about them. We talk about them every week. It seems like Jacksonville State they brought back a ton. 9 and 10 on each side of the ball. You mentioned their defense, bend but don't break. I think Liberty's defense is pretty good in this game, just giving up 17, 18 points. I know Jacksonville State's got into the shootout the last couple games, and then last game against Middle Tennessee. But I think they'll run it. Both teams will be able to. I thought the total was too high. I'm looking at the under in this game, and definitely Jacksonville State with the points.
Yeah, this is a great clash because with Jacksonville State, they're going to play as fast as possible, extreme tempo, but it's a run-oriented spread. It's a run-oriented up-tempo offense. So that's the thing. Pass-oriented offense means you're really going to get a lot of plays. But again, with the running clock, even if you're going up-tempo, but you're run-based and you're run-heavy, you're going to see more time come off the clock. So you will get a lot of plays snapped by Jacksonville State. But Liberty's kind of the opposite. And we saw this with Jamie Chadwell at Coastal Carolina, where they're in no hurry to snap the football. In fact, I'm going to bring it up here. Seconds per play. Jacksonville State's actually the fastest team based on seconds per play in college football. They're at number 1, but you go all the way down to Liberty. They're 117 out of 133 FBS teams as far as seconds per play. So the Liberty tempo is much slower. They bleed the play clock. And they take their time. They're very methodical. So you got one team playing very fast, one team playing very slow. So it should make for an interesting dynamic here as far as that total goes with Liberty and Jacksonville State. All right, let's go to Wednesday night where we have 2 more games on tap. UTEP and Florida International. We've got Florida International Pick'em right now. It's funny, UTEP opened a 2.5-point road favorite. It's down to Pick'em here, 44 the total. I'm on Florida International, man. I'm keeping that train going down the tracks. Fade UTEP until proven otherwise right now. This is just a wretched season for a team that I thought was going to be pretty good. It hasn't happened. 1-5 straight up, 1-5 against the spread for this UTEP team this season. Very, very incredible to see just how much they're struggling, especially on offense. They got we've said this a million times about UTEP. They're on our show, it seems, every week. I mean, Gavin Artison's an experienced quarterback. Their O-line brought back everybody. The running back, Deion Ankins, is back. They got a great receiving core, and they can't score points. They can't move the football consistently. I mean, 10 points in a loss to Louisiana Tech at home in their last game, 24-10. That's simply not going to cut it, not going to get the job done. Now, there is a situational advantage here for UTEP, and it's about the only advantage they have. They're off a bye week. They did not play last week, this UTEP team. So does that give them a leg up that they get extra time to prepare? I'm not sure it matters as much when you're a bad football team, and right now they are. The UTEP Miners. Florida International, look, it got away from them in the second half. They were right there in the game at New Mexico State last week. It was during a weeknight game in Las Cruces. They ended up losing 34-17. They've now had a tough couple of games. Liberty before that, they got routed 38-6. But this is a huge step down in class. And look, we did see Florida International, Conor Mack, beat North Texas outright as underdogs, beat UConn outright as underdogs. To me, there's not much difference, UTEP to UConn or UTEP to North Texas right now. I mean, to me, this is a winnable game for Florida International. You have to factor in, this is going to be a televised game on a Wednesday night there at Florida International. They don't get many of these, Connor. They don't. I mean, a national TV home game. Now, I don't know how much people are going to be jacked up for Florida International Football. This has been a pretty shitty program the last couple of years. But the fact that they get a home game on a weeknight, that's going to put some kind of, I think, energy and adrenaline into this home game, I think, for the Golden Panthers. So to me, look, I've been betting against UTEP every week for the most part. And they've failed to cover 4 straight. I was on UNLV against UTEP. I was on Arizona against UTEP. I was on Louisiana Tech that Friday night game against UTEP. I cashed all 3 times. I'm going back to the well. Give me FIU here. Pick them. I think they can win this game at home. I know they'll be fired up for it. And again, it's just been a disappointing season for this Miners team. And I'm not going to stop betting against them until they show me they can get the job done. And they haven't shown me much. And I also like, Conor, that they made the quarterback change, Florida International. I do think there's some hope now at quarterback for them. Grayson James was really, really struggling early in the season. Now, he's still got a lot of room for improvement, but at least with Kewan Jenkins, the new starting quarterback for FIU, I saw improvement throwing the ball. He's athletic, and I think he may get more and more comfortable as he continues to get starts. I think he is better than Grayson James, and I agree with Mike McIntyre making the quarterback change. I think there's hope for Florida International on offense with Kewan Jenkins at quarterback. What do you think here, Conor? UTEP, FIU.
Yeah, there's no way I could bet UTEP. They've just been the fade of fades all year long. I don't know how you can want to take this team with Gavin Hardison at quarterback. He's got to go. I know he's been there for forever. It's just he's a turnover machine that's not very good. Both these defenses are not very good, but both offenses are horrible as well when you go through all the numbers in this game. I like FIU. I think if you in this game, you have to take them or nothing. And this one could be low scoring. We don't have a crazy total, but the way UTEP it's been hard for them to score, 10, 17 points a game. It's been just awful. I look at the under too.
Yeah, 44. You're not getting a very high total. You're getting a very low total as you'd expect. But these are 2 offenses that have struggled. FIU is, I think, currently as far as offense, 70th as far as yards per play. UTEP's worse. 102nd on offense, yards per play. Like FIU's really actually got the better offense. They do. I really think so.
Real quick, it looks like there's some rain too, here, a little bit of wind in this game.
There is a chance. There's a really good site that's just a lot of people have realized it, and it's been bouncing around X and social media, and rightfully so, that better-weather.com. And it's a really nice site it gives you all the games, the chance of rain, the wind, how many miles per hour wind you're going to get at every game. And it's really good for checking the weather. And yeah, there is a slight chance of showers. So be aware of that here for Wednesday night with UTEP and FIU. All right, Sam Houston State and New Mexico State. We've got New Mexico State 3.5, 4-point home favorites, 43 being the total here in this game. Tons of money coming in on Sam Houston here in this game. They have a pretty solid defense for the most part. They had a couple of games there, Jacksonville State, when they blew it in the second half and lost in overtime. And then the Houston game, they really had a tough time matching up with, team speed. And I thought they'd have issues with Liberty. I thought Liberty's offense was really going to do a number on them. But I'll tell you what, in the second half, they shut out Liberty. I was so impressed. And, they did miss a couple of field goals, Liberty. You have to keep that in mind. Like, Liberty did move the ball a little bit on Sam Houston in the second half, but they missed a couple of field goals. But I was still impressed with the Sam Houston State defense once again in that game. And that's been what's kept them in so many of these games. They do have a winning point spread record so far this season as well. 3-2, 3-1-1, I should say, ATS this season, Sam Houston State. Their offense is still a work in progress. I can't say I'm a big fan of the quarterback, Keegan Shoemaker. Is very erratic, 27 of 41, 255 through the air last week. Can run the ball a little bit, but the offensive line's also been spotty. But you can't undersell the fact that this defense has really kept them in most games. Now, the question is New Mexico State. We saw them take care of business last week in a very similar spot. I believe it was a Wednesday night, and it was a home game against Florida International, won and covered. It was a pretty decent atmosphere. Las Cruces, again, another one of these teams that's not used to getting a national TV home game, but because this is these standalone Conference USA and Sun Belt games now on weeknights, you're going to get these opportunities if you're New Mexico State to have the television spotlight on you. So they played really well last week. They were amped up. I think they'll be fired up here. I mean, this is a tough one for me. I think New Mexico State's still the better of these teams. I like Pavia at quarterback. And the thing that concerns me here again is New Mexico State, with what they do on offense, they're very, very good as far as, being able to run that football. And there are still some concerns about Sam Houston's run defense, which did do well against Liberty in the second half, but they were also run on in the first half. That is by far the much stronger component of New Mexico State. Pavia can run. Their run game's a little bit better than the pass game. And Sam Houston, 4.5 yards per carry allowed and 186 rushing yards per game allowed this season, which does concern me a little bit. So the matchup concerns me a little for Sam Houston. So they've been a point spread darling. They've been good in the underdog role. I get why people are betting Sam Houston, but I think the matchup actually speaks to maybe an advantage for New Mexico State. And I certainly favor their offense over Sam Houston. So I don't know. Right now, I'm not on the game and won't be on the game. But if this gets closer to 3, I might move on the Aggies here at home. What do you think, C-Mac?
Let me hit up the chat real quick here. Perky Sanderson, Robert Franklin, Mike, Cheshire Cat, Rance, always in here, my dude. Razor Sharp Picks, Dabby Cab, shout out to Cab. Check out the sesh. He just got finished over that. My dude, Nuke Worker, as always. Ken, what's going on? Paul Taylor, the sailor up in here. Jeffrey Moore, EQ, what's going down? Wine Time, shout out to everyone. Tommy, hit the like button. Can Sam Houston offense move it a little bit? Shoemaker's been a little bit the difference the last 2 games, Babano. I mean, it seemed like it couldn't do anything. I mean, he's passing 100 yards, 44, 147. He had 285 against Jacksonville State, 255 last week. He looks a little bit better in this matchup. Can he throw on this New Mexico State defense? Both teams want to run it. I think this game's low scoring. Obviously, we got a low total here. Wind is pretty high in this game. I see it around 19 to 20. So I think there'll be a lot of running, tight game. And I lean to Sam Houston State in the 4 points if I had to take. Pavia, the offense is better for New Mexico State. I wonder if they're deep. I like how their defense, because they kind of were getting gashed. I was surprised the first few weeks. They've looked better. Can that get them a win here in the cover?
And you could make an argument this is not going to be one of the best defense or best offenses, I should say, they've faced so far. New Mexico State's defense against Sam Houston. And you talk about slow-paced teams, New Mexico State 128 out of 133 seconds per play. And that's what it's like always been with Jerry Kill. It's a very, very methodical run-based offense. Take a lot of time off the clock, long, sustained drives. That's what Jerry Kill wants. That's the way he coached back at Northern Illinois, Minnesota, and now here at New Mexico State. I mean, he wants those long, time-consuming 6, 7, 8-minute drives. And New Mexico State, that's not going to be in any hurry to move the football. Sam Houston as well. They're in the hundreds as far as seconds per play. So you are going to get you're not going to get any tempo on either side. And that's a big reason why this total is where it is here, 43 in this game. All right, let's go to Thursday night college football action. SMU, East Carolina. We've got SMU 9-point favorites at the open on the road, but now up to 11.5, 12-point road favorites here. 51.5 the total. And it's been rough here for Mike Houston, who's a good coach that's just stuck in a season where, you just lost too much talent, too much good, on both sides, too many good players on both sides of the football last year. You're having big time problems this year. Again, they lost to Rice 24-17 in their most recent game a couple of weeks ago. Not necessarily what you want to see. They got blown out by App State by double digits, lose by 18 against Marshall. Blown out by Michigan in their season opener. So it's been a rough go of it. Their only win is against an FCS opponent in Gardner-Webb. This squad has not beaten an FBS team yet this year. So it's been all kinds of issues here for East Carolina. You've got SMU coming off a 34-16 win against Charlotte where they were kind of lackluster. I think they were kind of, after the TCU loss, which took a lot out of them. It was a workmanlike effort. They got the job done, but it was far from dominant for SMU. I got to admit, it's been a bit of a step back here these last 2 games for Preston Stone. A quarterback I like, but, only 14 of 23 for 135 passing yards against Charlotte. Good news for them is Jalen Knighton, the really good running back, got going on the ground for this SMU offense. But I don't know. He hasn't played nearly as well here these last 2 games. Can he get the offense revved up here, though, against ECU, a defense that actually against the run, it hasn't been that bad so far this season. Passing yards, 210 allowed per game. But the problem for East Carolina is the offense has really, really struggled. And now you've got a situation, Holton Ahlers was a pretty good quarterback for this team, and they just have not been able to duplicate that production. And we've seen a little bit of both quarterbacks this season. We saw Alex Flynn in the loss to Rice, 21 of 44, 246 passing yards, fewer than 50, sub 50% completions. That's definitely something you don't want to see. He's got 1 touchdown and 5 interceptions and a 49% completion rate. He got the start after Mason Garcia, got benched. His numbers are, 58%, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. So you've got these 2 quarterbacks that have combined for ECU this year, 2 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. That is a horrific ratio. It's not going to get the job done. It's one of these games where I can't back ECU, but do I want to lay 11 on the road with SMU? I'm not sure. As of right now, pass for me. C-Mac, what do you think here?
Yeah, I don't really want to lay 11 with SMU. Yeah, they're the better team. I think Stone's, showing who he was. I think there's a little too much hype. I think he's a pretty good quarterback. In the past, even before Ahlers, these games, because I went back through it last night, were just shootouts, a ton of points. But man, then you look back the last few years when they played. But this East Carolina team's just different. They're having a tough time scoring, like you talked about. The quarterbacks haven't been good. The defense hasn't been good. I mean, where they have 17 against Rice. I guess the offense has perked up a little bit lately. This is just rough for ECU. Even a double-digit dog, I can't look their way. This is one I'm off.
He's thrown 11 touchdowns this year, Stone, but sub 60% completion rate. I thought it would be a little bit higher than that. Maybe this is good. I do worry that this could be one of those games that's a breakout game for SMU on offense. And the betting markets seem to think so. Because again, this opened at 9 and it's up to 11 now up to 12 now with SMU as road favorites. All right, West Virginia and Houston. How about this? We got a little Big 12 Thursday night action here. West Virginia 3-point road favorites, 52.5 being the total here in this game. Wow, this is a tough one here because West Virginia, it's not exactly a team that I trust laying points on the road. That being said, after that bad first outing against Penn State, they've won 4 straight. They've covered 4 straight. This defense has played really well. Against Pitt, they shut them down. Texas Tech, albeit that was a game where Tyler Shuck got injured. Baron Morton had to take over, and West Virginia completely shut them down in that game. And that's actually a more impressive performance by this West Virginia defense against Texas Tech, because we just saw Texas Tech with Baron Morton roll over Baylor pretty handily on Saturday. And then, of course, the big upset win at TCU, 24-21, 13.5-point underdogs. They go to Fort Worth in Texas there, and they end up beating TCU outright 24-21. Garrett Green's been steady enough, I guess you could say, at the quarterback spot this season. What I do like about his recent performances is he hasn't thrown an interception yet this year. You got to like that. And that's definitely been good news. He hasn't thrown for big yardage. His completion rate is, it's okay. It's not great, but, he hasn't made mistakes. He's relied on the run game and relied clearly on a defense that's a lot better than we thought. So, good signs here for West Virginia. Meanwhile, on the flip side, this Houston team, I don't like him. I don't like Dana Holgerson. Anyone that's watched this Hitting the Books show for years knows that I'm not a big fan of this team under his leadership right now. And sure enough, you look at every team they've played where it's been a halfway decent team, they've struggled. Even the UTSA win in week 1, their first game of the year, that was all Frank Harris turnovers, in the second half of that game. If he doesn't turn it over, UTSA is probably going to win that game. So I don't want to give Houston credit for that. After that, they lose to Rice, and they had that horrible first half where they didn't even show up. That's on the coach. You didn't even have them properly prepared for the game, didn't have them ready to play. And then TCU, you get blown out 36-13. Okay, you beat Sam Houston 38-7, and that was their one game that really looked good. But then right back into the tank again against Texas Tech, give up 49 points to the Red Raiders in that game. and end up losing 49-28. So I actually think if I were to bet this game, and I'm not a fan of either of these sides at this point, at this number, but I'd play West Virginia, and I would bet West Virginia -3 on the road before I take Houston. Because the one thing I'm getting from West Virginia, Connor Mack, is some defense, and I'm really not seeing much of it from Houston, other than the Sam Houston State game. But Sam Houston's offense is probably bottom 3, bottom 5 in college football this season. Other than that, this Houston defense has not been very good. I think you've got the better defensive team here, even on the road, but at a short enough price where perhaps you can lay a field goal with West Virginia in this one. What do you think here, C-Mac?
I want the better defense, and that's been West Virginia. That's one thing that's, been solid all year long. And this total to me is too high. Now, Houston's defense is horrible, but I don't think West Virginia, we know this offense with Green, they're very slow, methodical, want to run it. They get into the 30s? I like this game under. I thought this total was way too high for a West Virginia game. And yeah, you mentioned it. Not a big Houston fan. He should have been fired a long time ago there. More problems. And last week with Houston, basically a tie game, and they didn't score a point in the second half. They just, it's just like, what happens there? And they didn't have a ton of turnovers. When I was going through the box score, I'm just like, what happened? Just nothing. So this team, I don't know what you're ever going to get. And even as a dog, we talked about, I just can't take them. But I like the under here better. I think this total is way too high.
All right, liking the under here with West Virginia and Houston is C-Mac. All right, let's go to Friday. Tulane and Memphis here. A nice little AAC matchup. Tulane, 3.5 point road favorites, 56.5 the total in this game. I think Tulane is probably still the team to beat this year in the AAC. With the way things have, I know SMU's solid, but I think it's going to be Tulane that wins this conference. Now, I know Memphis is 4-1. I think Memphis has got to be one of the most disappointing, unimpressive 4-1 AAC teams so far that I've seen. Let's really break down Memphis here. They beat Arkansas State, who's absolutely brutal. Bethune-Cookman FCS team. Navy 28-24, and they struggled with Navy in that game as well. The Missouri game, they're actually pretty competitive there, and they beat Boise 35-32, but again, their defense wasn't really good. I think that's the problem here for Memphis. Same old shit under Ryan Silverfield, and I think this program has steadily gone a little backward under his leadership. I think that it's more their 4-1 in conference play because this has been such a fucking cupcake schedule so far for Memphis in conference play. Have they really played anyone even close to as good as Tulane? And even Boise, I don't put Boise in the same conversation as Tulane right now. Boise's been a mediocre up and down type of team this year. Missouri's a solid team. Other than that, though, it's been a very easy schedule that they feasted on as far as wins are concerned. Again, Tulane against UAB was not their best game, especially on defense. And even their offense took Michael Pratt a while to get going. Keep in mind he had been banged up a little bit. I think he's going to be a lot healthier for this game, which I think is going to be good news for both of these teams, who are both, by the way, coming into this game off of a bye week. They didn't play last week. And I think that just means, who would you rather have to have your team prepared for a game like this off a bye week? Willie Fritz on your side or Ryan Silverfield on your side? I know the answer to that, and that's Willie Fritz. I think the line's cheap. I think Memphis is getting too much betting market respect because of beating a bunch of cupcakes and facing, to me so far, a little bit of a lighter schedule. At least with Tulane, you had to play South Alabama, a pretty good team in their conference. Ole Miss, you had to play them, and you played Ole Miss tough. I remember that game. If you had Tulane, that was a bad beat. They were in that game most of the game without Michael Pratt. They had Kai Horton, the backup quarterback, playing, and they should have covered. They were right there with Ole Miss for 3.5 quarters, and then it kind of fell apart, and Ole Miss pulled away down the stretch. So I'm going to lay the short number on the road with Tulane. I just think this is the better team, and the price is cheap. What do you think, C-Mac?
Yeah, you mentioned both off the bye. I thought Tulane was a little bit asleep. We've seen UAB, though, the last few weeks, score the football a little bit more there after they've struggled. And then they came roaring back second half, won by 12. They're the better team. it seems like you need more points. The last few years, I remember this Tulane won at home, 38-28. That would get this over. And then at Memphis, 33-28. I think this game could be closer. I just have a tough time taking Memphis, too, always as a favorite. If they're ever a favorite, Memphis, do not take them, especially over 10. They just don't cover ever at all. And it seems like I would need more to look their way. So this is at a field goal. I think Tulane could get the job done. But I think we get some points here, and I think this could get over.
All right, leaning toward the over. I would lean that way, too, certainly on the Memphis side. And, Tulane was letting UAB move the football pretty well against them for much of that game. And after that game, I was like, wait a second, what is going on here? UAB moving the ball like this against a very good Tulane team, very good defense. But then UAB just did a number offensively on South Florida here this past Saturday. So maybe we got to give UAB's offense a little more credit. Maybe we don't discredit Tulane's defense as much for the way they played against UAB. So that's a good matchup. I think, though, the price is cheap with Tulane, and I would agree with what Conor's saying. I would lean over as far as the total goes in this game. All right, Pac-12 Friday night action, Stanford and Colorado. We've got Colorado 12-point home favorites, 58-59 the total in this game. I don't know how many people that are watching heard Deion Sanders after the win against Arizona State, where they got that narrow 3-point victory, a late field goal, got the job done for them against Arizona State. But you would have thought they lost the game and they got their ass kicked the way he was talking to the media. Like, he was livid. He said his team was sloppy. We didn't come out ready to play for much of that first half. So you would have thought they lost that game if you listen to Deion talk after that ASU win on Saturday. That tells me he's going to be whipping his troops into shape here over the week. He wasn't happy with the way they came out in that game. It kind of has me thinking maybe Colorado first half in this game, because he didn't like the slow start. He's sick of the slow starts. You can lay 6.5 with Colorado here in the first half at DraftKings. They've got a -6.5 on the Buffaloes here in the first half. I think if you're just listening to the coach and you see that they've had issues lately with bad starts in games, the USC game, they got down big in the first half. They didn't play a great first half against Arizona State. Deion's fed up with it, that they haven't been ready and haven't been at their best early in these games. And now they finally get an opponent at home where they have the potential to flex their muscles a little bit. Now, they are still dealing with injuries on the offensive line. Obviously, Travis Hunter, we're going to have to see if he's ready to come back. It's been a week-to-week thing with him. And obviously, he's such a significant impact player for this team. But you look at Stanford, and I'm still wondering how they were right there with Arizona. But outside of that, they've had some ugly performances. The USC lost by 46, 56-10, 42-6 loss to Oregon in their last game. Now, they are off a bye week, so there is an advantage here for Troy Taylor, the new head coach at Stanford, a little extra time to prepare. But after what I heard from Deion after the press conference against Arizona State, he was just said, I'm not putting up with this shit anymore. The bad starts, the sloppy football. Even in a win, he was not happy with what he saw from his team. It wouldn't shock me to see Colorado come out fast, come out strong, come out early here in this one. So I haven't bet it yet, but I've got my eyes on that first half for Colorado. I'd probably prefer that than the -12 for the full game. You can lay 6.5 with Colorado in the first half. This might be a game where Deion finally gets their attention and they have a much better start, something he's looking for after the last couple of weeks. Conor, what do you think here? Stanford, Colorado.
Yeah, one thing here, if you like Colorado, I wouldn't lay the points. I would wait here till the team total comes out and go that route. In this one, it seems like they could get into the 30s. Stanford doesn't have a great defense. They're off the bye. They played a pretty good first half and covered against Oregon because I had that bet split. And then they got routed in the second half there at home. But I think they're a all right football team. And one thing, even though their offensive numbers, if you look at it, aren't great when you go through everything, this Colorado defense is just, last. It's just almost in all these categories, 128, 123. Stanford's going to be able to move the ball, I think. One thing, when you don't have the personnel, this Colorado defense right now, they're going to give up some scores. If this keeps creeping up a little bit, I get 2 touchdowns and to be on Stanford.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I definitely think 14 would be way too much for me to be laying with Colorado. But like I said, now that I can get the first half with Colorado below the key number of 7, knowing that Dion's lit into his team and his players now for a bad start and a slow start for a second straight game against Arizona State, I definitely think that first half might be a good situational bet. Back home, let's get this team playing well in the first 30 minutes for a change. And let's see if, again, Travis Hunter might be back. It's not confirmed yet, but it's week to week. He's still out as of now, but it's, again, a week-to-week thing. Anthony Hankerson got banged up a little bit. The running back was very good, but looks like he's going to be okay for this game. And it has been good to see some of these offensive players, Weaver, Jimmy Horn, and Marion Miller, stepping up for Colorado. The defense is still leaky. The question is going to be, can Stanford take advantage of that Colorado defense? Because we've seen some weeks where Stanford's been able to move the football with the Ashton Daniels, Justin Lamson quarterback tandem. And then there's been some weeks they haven't moved the ball. And keep in mind, too, Ashton Daniels, that Oregon game, helmet-to-helmet hit, head injury coming out of that game, and he's still listed as questionable here for Friday night against Colorado. All right, next up Friday night, Fresno State and Utah State over in the Mountain West. Fresno State 6-point road favorites, 59.5 the total, actually down to 59. There's money coming in on the under right now in this game. And I think the reason for that is because, well, we actually saw Utah State's defense play a little bit better in a win against Colorado State. And we saw Fresno State's offense really for the first time this year struggle a bit against Wyoming, losing to the Wyoming Cowboys 24-19 as 6-point road favorites. I can't say I'm shocked because all Wyoming does as a home underdog in Laramie is cover point spreads and often win games. And they did it again in the home underdog role against Fresno State over the weekend. Yes, keep in mind, of course, with Fresno, we're dealing with potential quarterback injury, absence, I should say, to Mikey Keene. We do have a quarterback injury. It's a question of will it keep him out of this game. He suffered a leg injury against Wyoming. He got the leg rolled up on him after a sack, and he did not return following that injury. And it was Logan Fife having to finish the game. And I've now seen enough of Logan Fife to know that guy is not. There's a reason why when Jake Hayner moved on from Fresno State, that they brought in Mikey Keene via the transfer portal from UCF, because Jeff Tedford did not have faith and confidence in Logan Fife. And if you watched him play against Wyoming after Mikey Keene got injured, you know why they don't have faith and confidence in him. Here are his career numbers with Fresno: 4 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Okay, that's not going to get the job done. You got to protect the football and take care of it better than that from the quarterback position. So, again, a lot of the under money coming in because of the questionable status of Mikey Keene. We've seen some Utah State money. Fresno opened 7-point road favorites down to 6. Again, that's because of the potential that Mikey Keene might not play. I don't want Fresno if Mikey Keene doesn't play, because Logan Fife has not done enough for me at the quarterback spot. So this is a wait and see for me. I think there'll be value on Fresno if Keene plays. If not, then I totally understand why Utah State's taking money, and I totally understand why the under's taking money if Mikey Keene doesn't suit up here. Connor, what do you think?
Yeah, that's just the wait and see here, because there's no way you want to bet it with Fife at quarterback. I don't. Utah State's looked better, I thought, the last few weeks. What they lost to UConn by 1. That was a close game. Last week was better. Colorado State's not very good. I haven't been just high on them after they got murdered by Air Force. It seems like they're able to score some points. Now they are at home. This seems like a right spot. Keen in, I looked away, but if it's Fife, I got to look Utah State. This is one I think you monitor all week. Just wait. I'm going to be looking for info to make a play.
Definitely. And by the way, Utah State, I want to point out, they've had back and forth with quarterbacks this season. They started the season with Cooper Legas. And then, of course, McKay Hillstead took over. Then he got injured, and they went back to Cooper Legas last week. He's capable. He's a solid quarterback. There's not a big difference to Hillstead to Legas. Yeah.
Legas, though, when he got benched, I don't know. He just because I thought he looked good the second part of last year, and he was just having some games there early. And he didn't look like himself. So, yeah, he's back in. He had a good game last week, but that was against Colorado State. Pretty Swiss cheese defense.
Exactly. We'll see how he fares here. Fresno, a much better caliber of opponent for him to test himself against. All right, now we move to Saturday. Illinois, Maryland. Maryland, 14-point home favorites, 51 being the total in this game. If you've been betting against Illinois all season, you're doing quite well, and you're quite profitable. And talked about it last week, the Friday night game on this show, Nebraska, Illinois. I said, there's no way I can lay points with Illinois. I took Nebraska plus the 3.5. Nebraska wins outright. Illinois' offense is, again, didn't do much. Luke Altmaier has had just a brutal season. He's been really, really bad. And I expected a lot better from him coming over from Ole Miss, and he just hasn't played well. The run game is not there. The O-line play isn't there, and the defense isn't as good. Not close to what the defense was for Brett Bielema's team last year. Now you play Maryland. But Maryland here off the big Ohio State effort where they were in that game for a large portion of it. Wire-to-wire point spread cover in that game if you took Maryland. But, the second half, the offense bogged down after Little Tua had a pretty strong start. They couldn't keep that offense sustained in the second half. 37-17 was the final score in favor of Ohio State. Again, keep in mind, actually, you know what? As far as the cover goes, I'm saying cover because I got them early in the week at 20.5.
Yeah, it depends where you got.
Depends on when you got it. You're right. Because I know if you got Maryland at the closing number, and there was even more money coming in because Travion Henderson, the running back for Ohio State, was ruled out right before kickoff. And by kickoff, it was like 17.5, 18. So if you got the closing number, you didn't cover with Maryland. But it was a pretty solid effort for a team that's had a really tough time in Columbus in recent meetings. They're the better of these two teams. Do I want to lay 14 with them in this spot? I'll say this, at home, they have destroyed teams. So maybe we can lay. It would be Maryland or nothing for me. Don't know if I'll lay the 14, but I'll think about it. I'll say this, against teams that they're better than and they can outman. And I think Illinois is a team they should be able to control at the line of scrimmage. They beat Virginia by 28, 42-14. The last Big Ten opponent at home for Maryland was Indiana, who really, to be honest, aren't that much worse than Illinois right now. And Maryland beat them 44-17. So to me, this is Maryland or pass. It's just a question of, do you want to lay the points? What do you think, C-Mac?
Bingo. How can you want to back this Illinois team? 0-7 ATS, its last 7. They can't do anything right. It's just all aspects of their team, offense, defense, the line, the secondary. It's just not good. Yeah, that Nebraska win, I thought, was pretty easy. Maryland last week, I thought they looked great the first half. Baby Tua looked pretty good, and then he had some bad picks. Second half, it got away from him. I think we talked about it last week. Like, if he's clean, because if he makes some mistakes, that's when it gets away, and it did. And some people, because I thought, that they should have covered that whole game. They're back here at home. They should be able to move the ball. It just, I lean, but I don't really want to lay 2 touchdowns here with Maryland. I think they win, but I won't be on it.
All right. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm like, it's Maryland or pass. And I don't know if I'll end up actually going forward and taking it. And this, after the big Ohio State effort, I worry about the sleepwalk, especially early in the game from Maryland. We did see that against Charlotte. That Saturday night home game, that's another thing why I'm hesitant. That Charlotte game on a Saturday night at home, and Maryland couldn't have played a worse first half, and it took them a while to get going, and they didn't come close to covering the point spread that night. So
what was that one? Indiana too. Yeah. Weren't they tied, or was it Virginia was tied and they blew them out second half? It was 14-14 Virginia. Yeah. 14-14, and then they blew them out in the second.
Yeah, that was definitely Virginia as far as that game. But so they have had some slow starts at home, a couple. And I worry about that here. But other than that, it's certainly not going to be anything that gets me to bet Illinois, that's for sure. All right, next up, we've got NC State and Duke. ACC action. Duke 3.5-point home favorites, 46.5 the total in this one. You look at this Duke Blue Devils team, obviously a disheartening loss against Notre Dame a couple weeks ago. Just a situation where, they had that game. They were playing pretty well. Then Riley Leonard gets hurt. And that's a big reason why Notre Dame was able to eventually get the comeback victory in that game. So we'll see how this one fares here. Again, you got to keep your eye, obviously, on the status of Riley Leonard going into this game. He's listed as questionable. Now, it's an ankle injury. They initially thought, and the worst, that maybe he's going to be out for the season. But it's probably one where he's going to be out for some period of time. If you ask me right now, I don't think he's playing for Duke here against NC State. But he's not been ruled out. And Duke is off a bye week. They didn't play last week. So keep that in mind. That we'll have to see if he's able to end up playing here for Duke here in this game. But they haven't ruled him out, so that tells you that maybe they are going to be able. Now they have Grayson Loftus and Henry Balin here as their backup quarterbacks. We'll see if either of those guys can get the start here if Riley Leonard doesn't go. That's what I'm waiting on, Connor. But I will say this right now. I'm not enamored with taking NC State. They did get a nice win, 48-41. I'll say this, their offense with MJ Morris sure looked a hell of a lot better than it did with Brennan Armstrong, which is pretty funny to say that. And I said last week, it's a buy low spot on the over in that game because the quarterback change is going to light a spark on that offense. While the defense isn't nearly as good as it's been last year, and of course Marshall was able to put up a lot of points and move the football against NC State as well. So, I'm probably interested in Duke, and I'm probably interested in the over if Riley Leonard suits up. If he doesn't, that really changes things. So my decision-making here is really contingent upon whether we see Riley Leonard. And this is not your average, the starting quarterback to the backup is not much of a gap. There could be a huge gap because we just don't know if either of these guys, how good they can play at the quarterback spot if Riley Leonard doesn't go. So I won't be on NC State regardless. It's just a question of I'm waiting on Leonard's status to decide if I want to bet Duke and if I want to bet the over, which I will if he plays. What do you think here, C-Mac?
He's got to play. I mean, for me to bet and with Duke, he's that good. Duke's defense is pretty good. Then they have some playmakers. They have solid receivers, but he's that good. Dual threat at quarterback for him. So, yeah, it's a wait for me. I mentioned last week with NC State. They even covered. I didn't bet that, but they just snuck in. That was back and forth. Marshall, ton of points. The defense didn't look great, but I thought Morris was well. And he had some early interceptions there. I think that's why that game, there was a ton of points in that one. So, yeah, this is a wait and see for me. He's got to be in. But Duke at home, I think he can get it done.
Yeah, Duke's defense, man, that's another thing we got to give Mike Elko, who's done just a terrific coaching job, a lot of credit for. His defense was pretty bad the last couple Cutcliffe years. He comes in now, and look at the difference we've seen in this defense. Last year it was getting better, and this year it's even better than that. And you got to give a lot of credit for that. I mean, they're 13th yards per play defense in the entire country this season, while NC State is 51st. I mean, this is the better defense now. Like NC State has had a good defense all these years. Now Duke's actually the better defensive team, at least this season they are so far.
Real quick, NC State's been bad on the road, ATS. We know that, we talk about it. And, yeah, Duke's defense, except one play, 4th and 15, Sam Hartman gets 16 yards or whatever the hell it was. Stop him on that play.
Yeah, you mentioned NC State. Now, they're 2-0 straight up on the road, but 2 non-covers, 0-2 against the spread on the road barely against a weak Virginia team. And then UConn struggled to pull away and win by margin. So that's exactly why regardless of the status of Leonard, there's no way I'm on NC State in this game. Duke is the better of these two teams still, especially on defense this year. Texas A&M, Tennessee. We've got Tennessee 3.5-point home favorites, 55.5 being the total in this game. The only question for A&M is, the Alabama game was a big one. It's their second loss now of the season. They lost to Miami before that. First SEC loss. Are they easily able to bounce back from that 26-20 defeat to Alabama last week? That's the real big question here. Meanwhile, Tennessee's off a bye week, so it's definitely an advantage for Heupel and company. I don't know if I want to jump back on A&M after last week. It was kind of disappointing, to see how they fared, especially on defense against Milroe. Milroe's throwing the ball all over that secondary. I did not expect that from a guy that's been very erratic in the passing game this year for Alabama. That was definitely disheartening if you're an A&M fan to see the secondary kind of get carved up like a Canadian Thanksgiving turkey on a Monday like today. That's what we ended up seeing from the secondary there in that game. And the question is, can Tennessee do that to the A&M secondary? We know Tennessee offensively, Joe Milton, solid enough passing quarterback, but it's a team that prefers to run the football as their fundamental basis of moving the ball. And the one thing about A&M is the run defense is pretty strong. It's the secondary where they've been a little bit more susceptible. And Joe Milton and the Tennessee offense, like I said, they're definitely more of a run offense than a pass offense. So it's not like it's the worst matchup for A&M. But coming off the Bama game, going on the road here to Knoxville, a team that's fresh and rested off a bye, and a Tennessee defense that, against Florida, they had their problems, but they've really bounced back, played much better the last couple of games. See if they can keep that going here. Actually, I don't think Max Johnson played terribly. Some of his receivers let him down. A couple of drop passes by A&M in that game as well. I don't think Max Johnson was the reason they lost. His receivers kind of let him down on a couple of throws they should have caught. And then the secondary was the other reason. They just got beaten in the passing game by Jalen Milroe. So I think it's definitely a situational edge for Tennessee. Potential A&M off the Alabama game is a tough spot. Tennessee's off a bye week. But I'm probably not going to get involved because I really like this A&M team still. And getting 3.5 with them is tantalizing in this spot, especially when I'm not convinced Tennessee can exploit the clear weakness of the A&M defense, which is the pass defense, for a team that much prefers running the ball. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, Tennessee is at home here. Even with Milton, I really don't want to lay points with them. When I got to this last night, I just looked right at the under. I got it at 50, the A&M Bama game. And even if you didn't, you just got it under there. And that probably should have gone over. So just Fisher, I think they could have been in that game and won it and just didn't. And you mentioned Milroe. I was surprised too how well he threw the ball. Can he continue to do that for Bama? I don't know. But Max Johnson's been surprising. This could be close. So if you like A&M, I think you take the points in this one. But I'm going to look at the under.
All right, Conor, Mac, looking at the under here in this one. Syracuse and Florida State. We've got Florida State 17.5-point home favorites, 56.5 the total in this game. Remember, guys, last year, what did we see from Syracuse after they started, 5-0, 6-0 or something like that, and then they just absolutely collapsed down the stretch? I'm not going to say deja vu all over again just yet, but, man, we're starting to see signs of it, aren't we? I mean, these last couple of games for Syracuse, they started the year undefeated, but really, who do they play, right? Colgate, Western Michigan, Purdue, Army in those first 4 games, and then they play some real opposition. Clemson and North Carolina, the last 2 games, they get outscored 71-21 in those 2 games. So not good for Syracuse. And Schrader's up, and the offense has slowed down now that they faced better teams. The defense has been absolutely ripped apart the last couple of weeks by Cade Klubnik and Clemson at home. And then last week, Drake May and that North Carolina offense did a tap dance all over Syracuse in that 40-7 beatdown. So good luck against Florida State now. Although that being said, Florida State in these bigger favorite roles now, that's twice now when they've been laying more than 3 touchdowns that they failed to cover. Virginia Tech and Boston College, both of those games, they don't cover the number. Now, they aren't laying as many here, 17.5. I'd lean Florida State here. When you look at their schedule, they do play Duke, but it's at home. I don't think Duke yet is at that, even though they're much better Duke, I don't think that's one of those games where Florida State is like, wow, we're really looking ahead to that, because historically Duke's not that great in football. I worry about this Syracuse defense. I think they're really struggled with the athleticism and the speed of these and the weapons at these last few, and the great receivers have really carved up Syracuse the last couple games. And who's got great receivers? Oh yeah, Florida State, when you got to worry about Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman on this team. So it's a troubling matchup for a Syracuse defense that, now that they're facing really good teams and really good offenses, is starting to come unglued. So for me, it's FSU or pass. What do you think here, C-Mac?
I think so too. I think a lot of people thought after last week I couldn't do it. Take the points with Syracuse against North Carolina, and that didn't work out, and I'm glad I stayed away. I did have the under, which North Carolina defense, we talked about last week, playing a little bit better. I know Syracuse not the greatest offense, but man, that was and Drake May, 442. They ran for 202. I mean, gave up 650 yards. Syracuse just in trouble. Florida State, I think early and often. I just don't think the Syracuse team is very good on the road. Some of these games, last year they blew them out in Syracuse. Yeah. What was it, 38-3? But at home it was 33-30. Can we see a bounce back to the Syracuse team? I don't know.
By the way, it's worth noting, you might want to take Florida State first half, because the one thing about the Virginia Tech game and a couple of games is that they had that great for even first quarter, and then they do go through these little lulls where they fall asleep for a bit. Florida State, and that has concerned me a little bit. That'd be the one fear I have in this point spread range, where you got to play pretty strong for the majority of the game. You're going to cover numbers like this, and we do kind of see them go through these little lapses, these little lulls during the game, and that's not what you want when you're going to lay 17 and a half. But I just don't know if Syracuse is going to stop them. So for that reason,
I don't know if they can either.
That's why I still lean Florida State here. Yeah.
Yeah, and last week it got them. They didn't cover in the end.
Yep.
They win by
just short.
20.
Yep.
Yeah, just fell short.
They had that little second quarter where they kind of, like I said, fell asleep, and that's all it takes, if you're when you're laying numbers like this, to fall short of getting the money. All right, Missouri and Kentucky. You've got Kentucky 2.5 point home favorites, 52.5, 53 being the total in this game. This is an interesting battle because you got two teams off losses, different types of losses. Missouri, heartbreaking, gut-wrenching, wire-to-wire winning that game for over 3.5 quarters pretty much against LSU. And then LSU takes the lead. Missouri comes back, gets the lead back. Then LSU gets the lead back. And then, of course, the ill-fated pick six just breaking the back of any Missouri backers, including yours truly last week. And LSU gets a very, very fortuitous 10-point victory there against Missouri in a shootout. Missouri's defense struggled with LSU, but LSU's one hell of an offense. Even in the losses, that LSU's offense hasn't been the issue. Jaden Daniels has been terrific. This is a step down probably against Kentucky. It's still a ham and egger offense. It's still Devin Leary is not playing great at the quarterback position for a guy that's got all the boatload of experience that he has. So, for Missouri's defense, which struggled last week, and also struggled a little bit in some of their other games, Kansas State, they should have. This should be more of a manageable type of matchup here for them against Kentucky. That being said, you got Kentucky. The beatdown suffered against Georgia last week, 51-13. You can't underestimate the way they've played at home this year, including the big win against Florida, 33-14. And we saw Florida bounce back to take care handily of Vanderbilt last week. I think at less than a field goal, it's Kentucky or nothing for me, quite honestly. I like the way they've played at home. The defense had a tough time with Georgia. That would alarm me because Georgia's offense really hadn't gotten going until they played Kentucky last week. But when you look at the defensive numbers, Kentucky has given up 5.2 yards per play on defense. Missouri's defense is not nearly as good, 62nd, 5.4 yards per play on defense. So a little bit of a defensive advantage for Kentucky at home off a blowout loss. You'd expect a much better effort and performance from the Wildcats here. So at less than a field goal right now, I'm looking at Kentucky or nothing. I'm not sure I'll bet it, but I'm leaning Kentucky here. What do you think, C-Mac?
Yeah, the Missouri, if you had them, that's just awful. Awful. With Brady Cook there, pick six with what? About 15 seconds left?
Yeah, that's how long. It was right in the last 30 seconds. Absolutely
30 seconds.
Sickening. Hard to fathom. Hard to accept if you were on Missouri there. Brutal.
Yeah. Brady Cook, other than that, they look pretty good. The defense, though, we all know that game over. It was another easy LSU over game with Missouri, just a ton of points back and forth. I go over here, and I'm on Kentucky. I think it's short, back at home. They've owned Missouri. They won the last 7 of 8 here versus Missouri. Missouri's lone win 20-10 3 or 4 years ago. I think this is right where they need to be. They were a big public dog wherever it won Kentucky. I said, watch it. I think Georgia could roll, and they did. But back here, and one thing with Kentucky, Missouri's been able to score with Cook, but their defense is very good. Kentucky over-teamed the Vanderbilt. The Vandy game, 45-28. The Florida game got over easy. Georgia went over 51-13. I think we get more points, and this could be a sneaky over.
All right, sneaky over here with them. And then you're right. We've seen some games lately with Kentucky in particular where they've been going over these totals lately for sure.
Yeah.
There's no question. Yep. Obviously, we've seen that with Missouri here as well the last couple of weeks. So I'm with you there. I think totals-wise, it might be just
not great weather. I wanted to hit on that. We have some wind and rain in this game, though.
Yeah, let me just do a little better weather website check here on that forecast. But yeah, strong under. They're saying rain showers and 16-mile-per-hour winds. So hold off on this over until later in the week, and go back and look at the forecast again and see. Because you're right, though, it's not the rain that bothers me. As I always say, rain doesn't bother me with overs. Wind is what factors in. And that's what you got to be mindful of prior to this game on Saturday. All right, next up, we've got Indiana, Michigan. Michigan 34-point home favorites, 47-47.5 being the total in this game. Wow, it's a lot of points to be laying here with Michigan, but the case to be made for Indiana. I will say this with Indiana, they're off a bye week. That 44-17 loss at Maryland. They fired their offensive coordinator as well, Walt Bell. And there was someone that on a coach's radio show, the head coach Tom Allen, someone that was an Indiana season ticket holder. You can ask the coach questions, and they asked him a question like, "We need to make changes on offense. You got to get rid of your offensive coordinator." And Tom Allen's just, trying to smile and not, make too much of a big deal of it. Doesn't want to throw his OC under the bus publicly. He says, but yeah, right, we have to be better on offense among other areas. So they play the Maryland game after that coach's interview where that guy asked him the question that maybe you should fire the OC. They have that bad offensive game against Maryland. And then right after that, they do fire the OC. So obviously he was listening to that fan asked that question of Tom Allen because they have a new OC. Does it help this offense? I don't know, because the quarterback position has been unstable all year. They've had some issues there. Taven Jackson and Brendan Sorsby, haven't exactly been lighting it up. They've really committed the last at least couple of weeks to Taven Jackson at quarterback, but he's obviously going through his growing pains. 58%, no touchdowns, 1 interception against Maryland. And even the game against Akron, he wasn't really that good. 42%, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. The game, they barely escaped beating Akron at home. Does the offensive coordinator change? Usually I like to bet on the team and bet over if they've done something like this, change the offensive coordinator. But I don't know if I can do that here with this Indiana offense against this kind of defense, which is just so utterly dominant here, this Michigan defense. That being said, Michigan's got Michigan State after this. Michigan State's not very good, but it's still an in-state rivalry. Do they really put the pedal down and want to win by 5 touchdowns? They've been good laying big points this year, but more so on the road. At Minnesota, they went and covered. At Nebraska, they won and covered as well. But at home, laying these big points, East Carolina, UNLV, Bowling Green, they didn't cover. I think they pushed with the game against Rutgers at home. So as a home favorite, they've actually been burning money, which is why I don't want to lay this many here with Michigan. I might, if this total continues to drop, because I think Michigan can move the ball against Indiana. I don't doubt they will.
Yeah.
With the run game, with Corum and Edwards, with McCarthy at quarterback, they should be able to do what they want. But if this total continues to drop, I might look at a sneaky up over here, in the 47 range. Now, let's take a look at what the weather is going to be here on
another wind and rain. This is big, too, because we're getting into October. That's why we're checking on this a lot more, because we're going to start getting colder weather and rain and snow. So,
yeah, I'm seeing strong under, rain showers likely, and 18 miles per hour wind, which is the higher variation of winds. So another one where, in theory, I like the over, but wait until you see what this weather forecast looks like closer to kickoff Saturday in Ann Arbor at the Big House. Connor, what do you think here?
Yeah, and it seems like the last few years, this matchup, the total's been a bit higher. But Michigan defense has been dominant. I just think they win here. The number's just too big. I think it's like 35-7. Just one of those type games. Indiana, they might give up a late touchdown, but this Michigan defense, where they're going to continuously play, these teams, Indiana, Rutgers, they're just going to, Minnesota, they're just going to win, seems like 40-10, 47. So Michigan wins easy here.
Yeah, I mean, they should take care of business with ease. Just a question of, do they cover that number? And again, keep your eye on the forecast.
Yeah.
All right, Wake Forest and Virginia Tech. We've got Virginia Tech 1.5 point home favorites, 49 being the total in this game. Look, Virginia Tech, I applaud the fact that they didn't roll over. It started as badly as it could have started against Florida State last week. They didn't roll over. They didn't quit. Played hard. They're obviously outmanned significantly by Florida State. But now they've covered 2 in a row. They beat Pittsburgh handily at home, 38-21. 39-17 against Florida State. We knew their defense would struggle, but I got to admit, I just hope the head coach commits to him, because I don't want to see Grant Wells, even when he's healthy, play another game for this team. All right, he's just not that good. He's never been that good. And yet somehow there's this infatuation with him starting at quarterback here for this team. But he's been out due to injury lately. And even when he gets healthy, I don't want to see them go back to Grant Wells. I've seen enough from Kyron Drones here, the new starting quarterback for Virginia Tech, where he's given them some life. He's got a decent enough arm. As far as, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, unlike sometimes with Wells where he makes bad decisions. You're not getting that with Drones. He can run the football as well. I'd keep him at quarterback because it sparked this Virginia Tech offense a little bit. Wake Forest, they had that very bad game against Georgia Tech. They lost by 14 points as 3.5-point favorites. Clemson, though, down to the wire. Great defensive effort, but not enough from the offense. They fall short, losing 17-12 to Clemson. This offense just ain't the same without Sam Hartman. Mitch Griffiths ain't it. He hasn't been great on the year. 59% completions, lots of interceptions. He's got 6 interceptions on the year. He does have 9 touchdowns, but that's not a great ratio. He's making a few too many mistakes. You got to worry. Wake Forest empties the tank. Left it all out there last week. Anyone that watched that game was a physical, tough, defensive-minded, low-scoring game. Wake leaves it all out there, and now they got to try to bounce back after a disheartening loss. Now their second loss in a row and play on the road at Virginia Tech. Not an easy spot. The money's come in on Virginia Tech, and I understand why. What do you think here, C-Man?
This is not a game that I really want to be involved with, but you mentioned leave Drones in there at quarterback. He's just keep him there unless he makes a ton of mistakes. I thought Wake, kind of their defense last week was bend but don't break against Clemson. They move the ball, but their defense has been pretty good this year. They haven't been awful, but Griffiths he couldn't do anything. I think he threw for 125. They just weren't able to score. They're going to need to score here, but not one I'd love. I kind of lean under. But here at 49, 48.5, I don't love it. I'm off.
All right, Florida, South Carolina. We've got South Carolina 2-point home favorites, 51.5 the total. This total is dropping right now as we speak, as we're seeing some money come in here on the under in this game. As far as South Carolina goes, Spencer Rattler, the ups, the downs continue. They can look great for a period of time, and then all of a sudden there's those inaccurate throws starting to creep into his game again. We've seen a little bit of everything. And that second half for him against Tennessee was not very pretty. And in fact, most of his game wasn't great. No touchdowns, 1 interception. It is what it is. You're going to get some good. You're going to get some bad. That's been basically the epitome of Rattler's career as a starting quarterback. Will they be able to run the football here against Florida? That remains to be seen. I still can't get it out of my head that Kentucky just ran the football down Florida's throat a couple of weeks ago. And to be honest with you, when you look at it, was a much better effort for the run defense against Vanderbilt last week. But one thing about South Carolina is on offense, they're going to try to be balanced a little bit with their attack. They have struggled at times to run the football this year. They've had to rely a little too much, though, on Rattler. They haven't gotten their own ground game going. Which Florida run defense steps up? Because if the Florida run defense we saw against Kentucky, shows up here on the road against South Carolina can win this game. But if the run defense that shut down and smothered Vanderbilt shows up here and they make South Carolina one-dimensional, that's not great because we've seen Rattler have too many inconsistencies as of yet. That Florida, I can't get that Kentucky game personally out of my mind, C-Mac, that at Kentucky they just played so bad on defense and Kentucky just ran it right down their throat. The offense hasn't worked on the road. Graham Mertz and the offense struggled at Kentucky. They struggled at Utah in the previous 2 road games they played this year. I have to lean South Carolina. At home, laying less than a field goal, I haven't seen enough from either side of the ball, and especially on offense from Florida, to want to trust them here on the road. To be honest with you, they were lackluster against Vanderbilt early on. It took them a while to finally put that team away. So South Carolina or nothing. What do you think?
I had a first half -10 ticket Florida. Believe me, I know. Last week, and then they pulled away, got a touchdown with a minute left, and they covered full game. South Carolina. This is one thing, they don't run it, 87 yards, it's 126. The attempts is 101. They just got to throw it on this Florida team, which I think they can have some success. And Florida right now, I can only take them at the Swamp. I'm not going to take them on the road. In this series, they've played South Carolina well over the last few years, but South Carolina does have some wins at home, and this is a spot. I just don't know what I'm going to get with South Carolina. I don't know what's going to happen. It's like coming back to last year in the games they finished real strong. They could throw for 450 yards rather, or he could throw for 4 picks. But I lean South Carolina in this one as well.
All right, Michigan State and Rutgers in the Big Ten. Rutgers 5-point home favorites. How about the total here? 41. 41 the total here. Very, very low total with the Spartans against the Scarlet Knights. I think the first thing we have to look for here with Michigan State is, there's some injuries on offense for them. Trey Mosley, the good running back, is questionable. Malik Carr, the tight end, so keep an eye on that. It was a rough go against Iowa, albeit a tough defense on the road for Noah Kim, who had 3 interceptions for Michigan State. And somehow with 3 interceptions against Iowa, I got the point spread cover still, plus 10.5 with Michigan State in that game, which shows you how bad Iowa's offense is. Now, Michigan State on defense, how do they fare here? I mean, on the road, we'll see how it goes for Michigan State. It's a second straight road game, albeit they have a bye week, which gives them a little advantage. But again, makeshift coaching staff, cobbled together in the wake of the Mel Tucker shit show. So, can this staff put together and have this team in a position to play their best football? We'll see. Obviously, for Rutgers, look, against Wisconsin, an admirable effort. I thought their defense hung in there. It wasn't a very good game for Gavin Wimsatt. It was definitely step back for him at quarterback. But the defense continues to play hard. They're getting some negative plays. They covered the number against Wisconsin, 24-13 in that loss last week. Their only 2 losses are Wisconsin and Michigan, both on the road. Here's what's funny about Rutgers is that from a point spread standpoint this year, they are 5-0-1 against the spread. The Michigan game, it might be 6-0 against the spread, depending on what they did in the Michigan game and what number you got. But even as favorites this year, CMAC, we've always said about Rutgers, you really don't want to lay points with this team. Maybe this year you can, though. Northwestern, 5-point home favorites. They won by 17. 7.5-point favorites against Temple. They win 36-7. 6.5-point favorites against Virginia Tech. They win 35-16. Rutgers has been covering these numbers as favorites this season, and I definitely still think they're the better of these 2 teams. I'm going to do it. I'm going to lay 5.5 with Rutgers here. At home, Piscataway's been a nice home field this year for Rutgers. They played well in New Jersey so far this season for the most part. Perfect 4-0 straight up at home. Yeah, I'll lay the number here with Rutgers. Even with Michigan State coming off a bye week. I think this Michigan State team is just on defense, they can be had, and on offense, it's just really rough for them. And I think Rutgers might be able to run the football against them. And that's going to be the key to them winning and covering. What do you think?
This is another one. The game has some wind and rain in it. Until I see anything from Michigan State, like some fight, I don't want my money on them, period. Noah Kim, I haven't seen anything good out of him at all. It just seems interception, just no progress. It's just awful. And one thing Rutgers is they do have a defense. They did slide in and get the backdoor cover last week, but they were driving and threw a pick. Wimsatt right there, right before the first half. That was rough for them. I think it was a pick 6, actually. That was pretty bad, but they still backdoored in the game. This is a history, too, where Michigan State has whipped Rutgers' ass consistently. I know Rutgers here finally has a better team at home. I'd lay it with them, too. I think they could win by 10 points in this game.
I think so, too. I'm doing it. I'm laying it with Rutgers. I think they can finally get Michigan State here at their lowest point. All right, Louisville and Pittsburgh. Yeah. We've got Louisville, 8-point road favorites, 47 being the total in this one. Obviously, you got to question the spot here for Louisville, right? That hard-fought game last on Saturday and a big, big victory for them against Notre Dame. And a huge win for Jeff Brom, now 6-0, undefeated on the season. But they're only 3-3 against the spread. So be mindful of that. The NC actually, it could be 3-2-1 against the spread if you got Louisville -3 against NC State when they pushed and they won by 3. But, still laying a number like this. Remember, they were at Indiana earlier this year, 10-point favorites. They only won by 7. This doesn't feel like the right spot to want to lay. And I like Louisville a lot. You guys know that. I thought they were live against Notre Dame, but I don't know if this is the right spot to take Louisville, but I damn sure know I don't want to take Pitt. No way. Pitt is 0-4 straight up, 0-4 against the spread. Their last 4 games, Phil Jurkovec, who they thought, change of scenery for him would work wonders. It has not. He's been benched. He's not going to start in this game. It's not an injury either. He's been benched. Pat Narduzzi has benched Phil Jurkovec, and I can't blame him. He hasn't looked good at all. Now, it's not all on him, but they're hoping Christian Veilleux is going to take over at the quarterback spot, give them a spark here. Veilleux has played, thrown 27 pass attempts this year for Pitt, gotten into 2 games, 12 for 27, 44% completions, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Pretty hideous from Christian Veilleux, 44% completion rate, and they think this guy is better than Jurkovec because they're giving him the start here for Pitt against Louisville. So, yeah, no way. I mean, I don't want Pitt. I don't want Pitt, but I can't say I'm rushing to lay more than a touchdown in this spot with Louisville. So probably a pass for me. What do you think, C-Mac?
Yeah, I don't really want to lay over a touchdown here with Louisville. And Pitt's no good. Normally a Pitt team at home, I'd want them. They have, I don't know, Jurkovic's just been awful. So you go to the backup. I don't know if he can do anything either. The Pitt defense has just been okay. Of course, they've had a lot better defenses over the years. This is one I just want off. I want nothing to do with it. I guess if you like Louisville, I would just be a little bit leery of laying it after the big win last week.
I'd probably take Louisville before I take – that's that bad right now with Pitt, but I can't say I'm excited. And there's another game where keep an eye on this. We're going to have a lot of these Midwest, Northeast venues in college football on Saturday, plagued by potential of rain and or wind or both.
Hit it.
Yeah. So keep that in mind.
This has got some wind and rain too. Yeah,
yep.
16.
Yeah, this is another one. So keep that in mind. All right, next up, we've got Iowa State and Cincinnati, little Big 12 action here. Cincinnati, 5.5.5 point home favorites, 47.5 the total in this game. We're seeing the money come in here on Iowa State or Cincinnati, even though Iowa State coming off a big win against TCU. Albeit that was at home on Saturday, 27-14. Very impressed with the defense. I mean, they've made Chandler Morris look bad to the point where, Josh Hoover comes in and for TCU and just a terrific defensive effort, though. Now, the offense is still kind of a work in progress. Rocco Becht's okay, not great. But when they can run the football, and we've seen them commit to it, they're capable of having success. Can they do that, though, here against the Cincinnati defense? Cincinnati's only given up 100 rushing yards per game, 3.3 yards per carry. And I think that's what could be the problem here for Iowa State. If they're relegated to throwing the ball with Becht through the air, can they win? Can they hang in there against Cincinnati on the road? That was a nice win for Iowa State, but let's also not forget that on the road this year, how about 50-20 beat down at the hands of Oklahoma and 10-7 loss against Ohio? And that offense just did not work against Ohio in particular in that road game. And I don't know if it's going to work any better here against Cincinnati. Cincinnati's taken their lumps. They've lost 3 in a row straight up in ATS. The BYU loss was kind of disappointing what we saw from their defenses. They kind of got picked apart, but I think it's kind of a buy low spot on Cincinnati and kind of a sell high spot on Iowa State. And the betting markets, I just haven't seen any offense from Iowa State consistently on the road. Enough to trust them here. Taking on a Cincinnati team that I think's got this game circled, wanting to bounce back. I'm not sure I'll lay it with the Bearcats, but I'm leaning in that direction, and I would lean maybe to the under as well. It wouldn't surprise me if this is I'm seeing it now. It's another game where we could see some weather issues here in Cincinnati for this matchup here. Strong under, I'm seeing courtesy of better weather, chance of rain showers and 16-mile-per-hour winds. So, and I was leaning under as far as the matchup goes as it is. And now the weather thrown into the mix, definitely could be a lower scoring game. What do you think, C-Mac?
That's what I look to in this game. I think both defenses are good. And Iowa State, the defense came up big. TCU, I think 3 or 4 interceptions. They looked awful last week. And Beck played pretty well, enough for him to get the win. And then they got, their ass whipped to Oklahoma. And then the game before that, Oklahoma State, that went over. So their games have had some points, a little bit strange with them the last 3 weeks. But with the rain, everything, I think this day's under. Cincinnati with Emory Jones, they want to run it. One thing, they run it well. They get 220. It's 10th in the country. So I think you keep doing that. One problem is Henry Jones, don't make any mistakes, because that's why I can't lay the points here. Not that I'm rushing to the dog here with Iowa State, but I definitely like the under here.
All right, liking the under here. And keep in mind Cincinnati the last couple of weeks, right? They have the Oklahoma game, tough opponent, and we saw how good Oklahoma was against Texas. And then, of course, they have to play BYU on a Friday night, short week to Provo, Utah, last Friday. And so those are tough spots. They really are tough spots for Cincinnati. Now they're back home after a couple. It feels like this is a great situational spot here for Cincinnati.
Are they off the bye here?
They are not. No, but they played Friday at BYU last week. And again, that was a pretty tough spot for them travel-wise after the Oklahoma game, which was a game where they exerted a lot of energy into it. So I think it's a nice little situational spot for Cincinnati here. The question is, do they get the job done laying 5.5? All right, Miami and North Carolina, one of the highlight matchups on Saturday. North Carolina, 4-point favorites, 56 being the total in this game. And this is definitely one of those deals where it kind of feels like, people saw what happened with Miami last week. Finally looked human, not only failing to cover, but losing outright to Georgia Tech on Saturday night. A Georgia Tech team that had just been beaten as 3.5-point favorites against Bowling Green at home, and they turn around and win outright as 3-touchdown underdogs against Miami. Isn't that college football for you in a nutshell, how crazy it can be? 3-touchdown favorite at home against Bowling Green, lose outright. Turn around, 3-touchdown underdog, you beat Miami outright.
I loved it.
Week. That's crazy. Yeah. Exactly. And this is not hyperbole. This is not Ian going on a rant just to, overblowing things or over exaggerating. That was one of the all-time worst coaching decisions I've ever seen. And I have no.
Why are you doing it? Why are you It's like end of time. It's just like take a knee. I've never. What is he trying to get his running back? Like pad the stats?
He's got to see his running back. He's got to get a little more snaps and plays from his running back. He's got to evaluate his depth. What the fuck? Or it's absolutely
take the knee.
Yeah,
go home.
And you win.
He deserves it.
Yeah, absolutely awful. And look, this is another one of these coaches, Mario Cristobal, that falls into one of these categories. If he can recruit, he can bring in the talent. He can't coach him. He can't make adjustments. And his game and clock management during games is horrific. And he did this bullshit at Oregon, too, with the failing to take the knee, and it cost him there, too, in a game a couple of years ago. He's just dreadful. Like, if you can't do the job and manage the game properly with common sense, like most people watching that game would have done, let someone else make the decisions. Because clearly you cannot. You do not have the mental capacity, clearly, to make these kind of decisions. I couldn't believe my eyes. And Tim Hasselbeck, credit to him, in the booth for ACC Network, calling him out, ripping him on. He doesn't care.
Good.
We're not here to be, cheerleaders and wave the pom-poms. You fuck up like that, it's the job of the analyst to mention it, point it out, and he did that, and deservedly so. And sure enough, the moment they fumbled, I'm like, right when I was shocked. Everybody was, that he didn't take the knee, because it was less than 40 seconds left in the fourth quarter, which means the play clock means that's the last play. All you got to do is take a knee. You don't have to run another play as long as that game clock is below 40 seconds, which it was on that handoff play. Sure enough, fumble. No, and of course, Georgia Tech had no timeouts either. Fumble, they get the ball back. And just a minute or so after it happened, I'm like, wouldn't it be funny if they go down the field and they win this game and score a touchdown? And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And he doesn't deserve to have it happen to him as well, to make that kind of all-time bonehead decision, an all-time mistake like that. It's not hyperbole. It's one of the all-time worst coaching decisions you will see. Yeah. Period. Full stop. End of story. And how does Miami now bounce back from that here against North Carolina? It kind of feels like, though, one of these games where now everyone's totally abandoned ship on Miami, going to want to lay the points here with North Carolina. North Carolina off a huge beatdown win over Syracuse, and Miami off this stunner of a loss as almost 3 touchdown favorites against Georgia Tech. This is probably a nice little buy low spot on Miami if you want to trust them here. Do you want to trust Tyler Van Dyke, who, look, it's been great. The offense was great all season until that game against Georgia Tech where they couldn't really move the ball. They really couldn't get anything going on offense consistently in that game. I don't know what I'm going to do yet with this game. What I do know is it kind of feels like this is buy low on Miami. Do I want to take them against this North Carolina offense right now? I'm not so sure. It does feel like kind of what we saw with Georgia Tech, right? Georgia Tech, nobody wanted to bet Georgia Tech last week against Miami after they lost to Bowling Green. And sure enough, they won outright as a 3-touchdown dog. Now nobody's going to want Miami because they shit the bed against that Georgia Tech team. And everybody just saw North Carolina destroy Syracuse, and they've looked really good here these last couple weeks. So I don't know. It feels like buy low to Miami, but I don't know if I could stomach betting a team coached by Mario Cristobal right now. What do you think here, C-Mac? It's a pretty interesting game on Saturday with these two.
Yeah, I don't know if I get involved in this game. North Carolina's won the last 4. Some of them got over this total or just below because you think there could be some points. I'm going to wait here. There's some weather in this game, another one. Check the weather here for Saturday. And out of those 4 wins, 3 of the 4 were by 3 points. So we got a line here, 4, 3.5. So right now, I'm off. I like the way UNC's played. I talked about it the last few weeks. The defense came again. I thought their defenses looked pretty good. And I don't know when that's going to catch up. I can't believe I've been saying it. I don't know, probably a ton of people had the under in that game, but I thought they looked all right. But it does seem like maybe a buy low spot with Miami. I still think they're a good football team. Just why are you running the ball with 38 seconds? They have no timeouts.
Take
you have a 3-point lead. Take the knee and go home and win. They deserve, the loss. And that was great. It just seems more of these teams, they start out like this and just deserve it that they lost. Yeah. They start out 5-0. Everyone's like, Miami, the U's back. Yeah. See ya. I'm glad. I had Georgia Tech. I had some money and I loved it.
Wow. And plus 700 is what we were looking at there with the money line on the Georgia Tech in that game. I'm convinced of it that, it was starting to look good for a little bit there, but sure enough, Mario Cristobal strikes. It really makes it hard to believe they're going to win anything big with this guy as the coach. Seriously, when you see something like that. And you're right. North Carolina has, owned Miami. They've won 4 straight, but the problem is the last 2 meetings and 3 of the 4 that they've won were 3-point victories. That's not going to get it done. North Carolina's laying 4 here. So that's the one tricky part here. They were all 3-point wins, 3 of the 4 for North Carolina. I think the over, if the weather, this weather forecast as of right now isn't as bad. Slight rain showers, and the wind is not going to be nearly as bad as some other places. If the weather's halfway decent, I could see this going over the total here because I think Miami's offense will play better against North Carolina. And North Carolina should be able to score some points here. They've scored points on anybody so far this year. Look at these numbers, 31-40, 31, 41-40. I mean, it's just been a juggernaut. And now they got Tez Walker back on offense, the best wide receiver by far, and he never should have been suspended as long as he was by the NCAA. And finally, Wright was done and reinstating him, and he played his first game last week against Syracuse. So another weapon. Tez Walker now finally available here for this already prolific North Carolina offense. All right, next up, we've got Ohio State, Purdue in the Big Ten. Ohio State 19.5-point road favorites, 50 the total in this game. I worry about Purdue's defense matching up here against Ohio State on the offensive side of the ball. It's a Purdue team that, we see the struggles on defense from them. I know the last couple of weeks were better, but Iowa and Illinois are not exactly outstanding offensive teams against the good offenses, 38 allowed to Wisconsin, 35 to Syracuse. Ohio State should do some damage. You look at series history. Now, I'll say this at time, Purdue has snuck up here at home, and the last time they hosted Ohio State was actually that 49-20 win for Purdue. That was 2018. I don't know if this team's got the personnel to be able to do that kind of have that kind of performance against Ohio State. Keep in mind, Ohio State 2 years ago, 59-31 in Columbus against Purdue. The problems for Purdue are not only the defense against the better teams they've played, but also, the play at quarterback from Hudson Card has been very inconsistent. 6 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 63% completions on the season. We'll see if he can give his team a chance to at least cover the number here on Saturday night against Ohio State. This is another game where, it's a recording here, but yeah, check the weather. Strong under, chance of rain showers, 20-mile-per-hour winds as of right now in West Lafayette for this game. So that's definitely an under weather forecast right there. For me, it's a pass as of right now on this game. I'm not sure Ohio State's one of those teams, even though they've got matchup advantages galore. I'm not sure I'm ready to lay almost 3 touchdowns on the highway with this team. What do you think, C-Mac?
Yeah, the weather is an issue because if there wasn't, I think this Purdue defense isn't very good. I look Ohio State or even their team total, but the weather isn't good in this one. I thought Purdue had a shot to win last week. They could have done. The defense, isn't great. Hudson Card's inconsistent, and they've been awful at home. It's like, I wish I had a ton more points here to maybe look at Purdue. They haven't been able to cover the number, so I'm off.
All right, California, Utah in the Pac-12. We've got Utah 13.5-point home favorites, 44.5 being the total in this game. I'm telling you what, we started this show weekly in August, and I never thought we'd still be doing the Cam Rising watch, at quarterback this deep into the season. Here we are. We're still wondering when he's going to return here for the Utah Utes. Obviously, still yet to get into a game, which means it could be. And if we do, if we don't see, I should say, Cam Rising again this week, Bryson Barnes is already ruled out, it looks like, for Utah and set to miss extended amount of time. So Nate Johnson becomes the quarterback, who's not a great passer. He's a good runner, but he's not a great passer. So does that mean Kyle Whittingham's been doing a 2-quarterback system, but he did it with Johnson and with Barnes, where he had Johnson as the running quarterback, Barnes as the throwing quarterback. But now Barnes is out. He's only got Johnson. So is he going to do a 2-quarterback system, maybe with Brandon Rose this time, who's the 4th quarterback on the depth chart? We'll have to wait and see. But again, all of that's a moot point if Cam Rising returns, but we don't know that as of right now. Meanwhile, you look at California. They got just absolutely ripped apart on defense by Oregon State, man. They just could not stop the Beavers in that game. And I said coming into the year, Cal's going to be more of an over team because I don't think their defense is as good. And I do think their offense, they're trying to play a little faster tempo. They've got a few more playmakers than they've had in years past. And sure enough, what was it, 52-40, that final score for Oregon State beating Cal last week. They've gone over the total now, 2 of their last 3 games. Actually, the Arizona State game probably should have went over the total. The problem is Utah's not an over team. Every Utah game this year has gone under the total. Their offense is having a hard time sustaining drives and moving the football, especially the last couple of weeks without Cam Rising. But after what I saw from Cal's defense, it's like, what the hell is going to give here? Utah's struggling offense or Cal's struggling defense? It makes it a tough game to call here. But by default, you know how I feel about Utah at home. I got to have a good reason to bet against them when they play at home. They are already, against FBS competition, 2-0 straight up, 2-0 against the spread at home this year. I'm not going against them in Salt Lake, especially with a team I don't trust on defense as the opponent. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, the defense got ripped apart, Cal. But Mendoza played all of a sudden. They put him in. I thought he played well. He did have really one pick.
Yeah.
He did, and it was 34-32. And it just a crumble in the 4th quarter. They had a pick followed by a fumble. It just ended it there, which I thought that game could have gone down to the wire. So that sucked because I had Cal. And they were able to run the ball on Oregon State. Their defense a little different on the road. But can they do this here in Salt Lake? 4th in the country. They only give 67 yards. Because Cal, they can run it, 217 a game. I don't know if they can run it here. I'm with you. We talked about for years. Their defense could win this game for Utah. It's the offense is just not there until Cam Rising, whoever you are. I don't even know if he's been seen. I'm just joking. Is it Cam Rising out there? Is he can ever come back?
Alive?
Yeah. But yeah, I'm off. I mean, I think Utah wins. You want to lay the 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, this is going to be, by the way, I mean, it's got to be said. And Oregon State's pretty solid on defense, although they even had some cracks last week. And Fernando Mendoza played well. I think he's going to play again. That was his first start. He's a
I
highly
do too.
touted freshman, really highly projected. Sam Jackson and Ben Finley, it's not like they were lighting it up for Cal at quarterback. So I think Mendoza is going to get this start. But you go from at home against Oregon State to this defense, Utah on the road. Man, that's a huge step up. Let's see if the kid is ready for it in this one. All right, next up, we've got Oregon and Washington, man. Obviously, game day is going to be there. ESPN taking their act to Seattle for this huge Pac-12 showdown. Washington, 2.5-point home favorites, 67 being the total in this game. What a phenomenal matchup. Two terrific offenses, two under the radar, much improved defenses as well. Like Oregon has played really solid on the defensive side of the football this year. They've given up 10 or less in 3 straight games. I think Washington's defense is a lot better this year, but it also feels that as much as the defenses are better on these teams, it's going to come down to these two outstanding quarterbacks. And what a battle. Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. This is going to be a lot of fun to watch. And I think when you look at the numbers, the first thing you have to look at when you're handicapping Washington, we know their passing game is number 1 in the country. Passing yards, completion rate, 74% for Michael Penix Jr. He's been outstanding. But the secondary for Oregon, 5th in terms of fewest passing yards allowed per game. Their secondary's been pretty good in terms of yardage. But then you look at completion percentage, and Oregon's defense is only 76th in the country in opposing completion percentage for opposing quarterbacks. So that tells me that they haven't given up the big plays based on the yardage numbers, but they've been giving up a lot of completions and a lot of efficiency. And that's a stat that really stuck out to me, and it kind of worried me for Oregon in this game. On the road against, obviously, I think one of the most accurate quarterbacks that we have right now in college football, because Michael Penix Jr. is dropping dimes. Like he's fitting that ball in right where it needs to be to this terrific slew of receivers that he has to work with here at Washington. Although, they have a couple that are questioned. Jalen McMillan's the big questionable one, but they've got a lot of depth there. Jalen Polk, Jeremy Bernard, Romeo Dunze. These are all outstanding receivers here for Washington. And I think, that's going to be a big matchup question here for Oregon. While, they haven't given up a ton of pass yards, but they've given up a great deal of efficiency. Oregon, they're more of a run offense than a pat, although we know Bo Nix can throw the football too, but they also want the run game to be a big focal part of the offense. And you look at Washington here, 3.8 yards per carry allowed, on defense against the run, 121.6 rushing yards per game. They've actually been worse against the pass. So there's some things in this matchup that kind of point me a little bit toward Washington. And I think I shouldn't say that. Dan Lanning's a terrific coach too, but I really like Kalen DeBoer. I really do. Home crowd might be just enough to push this toward Washington. It's below the key number of 3. And look, this actually did open 3, and I think there was just a small bit of money that came in on Oregon earlier this morning. It's a tough game. These are two terrific teams, and either one is capable of winning this game. But I'm going to side with Washington a little bit here, as long as this stays below a field goal, and what should be a great game. 67, don't want to bet it under with these two quarterbacks and these two offenses, but I don't know if I'll bet the over, because I think these defenses, both of them, playing better this year and maybe a little bit better than people think. What do you think here, Connor, in what should be an outstanding Pac-12 clash?
Yeah, it should be. I don't know if these defenses are better. I don't buy it at all. Washington's played Arizona, Cal, Michigan State, Tulsa, and Boise State, and Oregon, which I've talked about. They lost Texas Tech, but I think they could have lost that game. Hawaii, Colorado, Stanford. I don't think they played anybody.
Question the caliber of offenses that these two teams have played. Yeah.
I think people are looking at Oregon, won a little, maybe revenge from last year. Washington went to Oregon and won, and it's right, this total, the 37-34. I think the game could be similar. Washington was able to throw it all over Oregon, and Oregon was able to run it all over Washington. 313 yards Oregon had in that game. I think we get a good one. Yeah, in this, I think we get points. Could maybe get over. You could look at the team totals. I kind of lean Washington. As long as it's under. I get why people see it the 3, or if you got 3.5. You look at Oregon. This game to be close for some revenge, but under a field goal, I lean a little bit to Washington here at home.
Yeah, and I mentioned that Washington talent. I mean, Bucky Irving at running back for Oregon, Troy Franklin, Tez Johnson, among other receiver for Oregon. I mean, both teams are just loaded with offensive talent. One thing that might bode well for the over is it does feel like both of these teams at times this year, have 8.1 yards per play for Oregon, which is outstanding on offense, and 8.8 yards per play for Washington on offense, which means, and Washington's first in yards per play on offense. Oregon is third, which means they've had the big play this year. And that's going to help you if you like the over, the potential that both teams have to create the big play. We'll see if that does transpire here Saturday. What a great game that should be. This next game in the Pac-12 should be pretty good one as well. UCLA and Oregon State. We've got Oregon State 4, and it looks like 3.5 4-point home favorites. 54 being the total in this game. I got a lean at the very least here to the Oregon State side. Like, we just saw them destroy Utah at home. We know how strong this home field is. And I saw Dante Moore against Washington State last week. And the only reason UCLA it was so tough for them to win and cover, they should have beaten Washington State by 3 or 4 touchdowns, because that defense was phenomenal for UCLA. Cameron Ward was he was bad, but a lot of credit has to go to the defense of UCLA. They played great. But Dante Moore did not play great. He had a pick 6. He was very inaccurate, and he played like a young quarterback. I think he's going to be a good one in time, but he's going to have these little moments where he doesn't play well, and he's still trying to, especially when you play better teams. And now he's got to go on the road at Corvallis. We know how tough it can be against Oregon State in this building, in this venue. I think he's probably going to struggle here a little bit on the road against Oregon State. Oregon State, like I said, we know how strong this home field has been. Obviously, they weren't at their best. They weren't at their sharpest on defense against Cal. They certainly were on offense. DJ Uiagalelei was strong. The run game with Martinez was there. The balance was there. And to me, UCLA on offense from Moore last week, he plays like that here on the road at Oregon State, and Oregon State's going to take care of business. Simple as that. If he doesn't step it up in this game, because they won in spite of Dante Moore in the offense against Washington State. And I'm not nearly convinced the defense will play as well on the road. That being said, they did play well against Utah a couple weeks ago, but Utah's offense is limited right now. Oregon State's is not. I'm leaning Beavers here. What do you think, Conor Mac?
Yeah, I lean the Beavers too. They're just at home. A 3 would be a little bit better. But I have to say, it's just at home there last week was good for UCLA. We talked about it last week. Now they go on the road, but their defense, I know it's still early, but this defense, they're tops in all the categories.
Hell of a defense he's got.
I'm shocked how well they've been playing. So if they bring that, always helps out on the road to keep a game close. And if Moore makes those mistakes, it's bad. They lose. They lose by a touchdown at least in this game. But Oregon State still has some pretty good defensive numbers, even though they've played a couple shootouts. The defense always seems to play better at home too here in Corvallis. So to me, especially if I get a 3, it's lay it with Oregon State, even with how well UCLA's played.
All right, Arizona and Washington State. Very interesting game to handicap here. Washington State, 8-point home favorite, 61 the total. Arizona left it all out there against USC, man. What an effort by Jed Fish's team. What an effort by everyone really associated with that Arizona team. The defense, how about them hanging in there as long as they did? I mean, for well into the first half, they made Caleb Williams look as bad as I've seen him play. He was 1 for like 6 or 7 throwing the ball to start the game against Arizona. Yeah, I mean, they came to play, but again, it's one of those deals where they left it all out there on the field. They had opportunities to beat USC. They lose in that crazy marathon overtime game, and now they got to go on the road, a second straight road game up to Pullman, Washington, play this Washington State Cougars team off their first loss of the year. It feels like this could be a tricky spot for Arizona. And think about, too, the last couple of weeks, Connor Mack, they played Washington and USC, two Pac-12 heavyweights, back-to-back games, played them tough, played them down to the wire. I think they might hit a wall here, personally, Arizona, in this game. I worry about that. And look, Noah Fifita, who has been the quarterback with Jaden DeLora, ailing and injured for Arizona. This Fifita kid's played pretty solid. I like the effort. He can run around a bit. His accuracy was pretty good. I mean, what was his numbers? 25 of 35, 303 through the air, 5 touchdown passes against USC last week. It's just such a difficult spot, though. I mean, Washington and USC in back-to-back weeks, and now you got to go on the road against a still very good Washington State team, even though they lost against UCLA, and the offense got shut down. I was shocked to see the offense struggle like that against UCLA last week. But prior to that, they had scored on pretty much everybody they played. And let's not forget this offense with Cameron Ward. Yeah, they couldn't get out of their own way last week, but they were good enough to hang 38 points the last home game they played against a very good Oregon State team. So I think it could be a tough spot for Arizona. I'm not saying I'm laying the points with Washington State, but it would be the only side for me in this game would be to lay it with Wazoo. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, Arizona. Feisty team. I've been all over them all year. 5-1 ATS. Fifita, he showed it. I thought he could show it on that SC defense. This kid can play. He's highly touted, even though they had DeLora, they said in practice. And yeah, I thought the defense was a little bit better, and it showed early. They started to give it up, Arizona, that they're okay. This is a bad spot for him, though. Washington State just owns him back home here at Pullman. I'm not going crazy, if I really like under a touchdown, because I think there'll be some love with Arizona, how they've been playing lately. But if I can get that, I'd lay it with Washington State. They come back home here. Ward gets right, and I think they win.
All right, UAB and UTSA. Oh, by the way, Jacob Cowing, I want to point out for Arizona, is an absolutely amazing receiver, man. He's got NFL potential, that kid. He's been great all season, but that USC game in particular, unbelievable job. UAB and UTSA, we've got UTSA 9.5 point home favorites, 64.5, 65 in some spots, the total. And to me, this is a game where I didn't even hesitate. Early in the week, I knew I was going to be looking in this direction, and that's over. UAB, man, this is a hell of an offense that we're starting to see develop here with Jacob Zeno at quarterback, with Mortensen, the son of Chris Mortensen, calling plays. Trent Dilfer hired him because he's buddies with his pops from ESPN. Chris Mortensen, who's now retired, his son is the offensive coordinator with UAB. And you talk about a team that's playing extremely fast. UAB is doing just that. They can run the ball. Amari Thompson, Tajon Palmer, two pretty good receivers. The O-line's really, done a nice job the last couple of weeks. They moved the ball against a pretty good Tulane team. They even scored 21 against Georgia. They put more points on the board against Georgia UAB than Kentucky did, last week. So, UAB, and I might even look for the first time at UAB plus the points here in this game, just because of how good this offense is. They have covered 3 in a row, and this is a team I was not very enamored with coming into the year. But, man, their offense has just been explosive, dynamic. Now, their defense still has issues. They've given up 35-plus points now in pretty much every game this year, except the opener against a FCS team. They've given up 49, 41, 49, 35, 35. So they don't have a very good defense, UAB. But the back door is always going to be open. And UTSA, they are coming off an impressive win against Temple, 49-34, much needed over the weekend. Frank Harris returned and looked like the old Frank Harris last week. No question about that. But that UAB offense, man, it is really, really good. And the UTSA defense is still not what it once was. They've given up now 37, 45, and 34. And Temple, which has not done much on offense, EJ Warner's going up and down the field last week. So absolutely love the over, 64.5. It's one of my strongest. I can already tell you, it's already one of my strongest totals on the board this week in college football. In that dome, the Alamo Dome, I think they're going to go back and forth, these two teams on offense. I love the over, and I'm also probably going to grab a little UAB here, plus the points, because that back door is open for an offense that's clicking right now. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, there's going to be points. I was close to taking Temple last week, and I didn't. And they hung in that whole game till the very end, and lost 49-34, didn't cover. So I'm kind of glad I stayed off. But Harris was back. He looked good. But this UTA defense is just not very good. There's a ton of points here. This does get over. And I took the 10 with UAB. I just like how they've been playing lately. I think they can score on UTSA. And I'm sure, Harris and UTSA is going to score on them. So I see a lot of 9s. It has dropped, but I still think that's all right, even at 9 with UAB.
All right, we go to the Big 12, BYU and TCU. TCU 5-point home favorites, 53.5 the total in this one. TCU in bounce back mode. That was a rather poor performance, to say the least, against Iowa State last week. Although Ames, Iowa can be a tricky spot, especially at night, but still to play that bad. And when you look at TCU here this season, I mean, where's their signature win? You really have to ask yourself. Was it SMU? I guess 34-17. Colorado, they lost in the first week of the year. I mean, Houston's not a big-time win with what I've seen out of Houston. West Virginia and Iowa State, they lose back-to-back games as favorites. It's not what I want to see. BYU, I'll tell you what, I didn't like BYU coming into the year. Everybody knows that's listened to me all these months. But they beat out Arkansas as 9-point dogs. Keaton Slovis in the offense is looking good. This Chase Roberts kid at receiver for them is really good. They do have some weapons. Their offensive line is starting to play a little bit better. Defense still has some issues. BYU, they can give up points, 31 to Arkansas, 38 to Kansas, 27 to Cincinnati, but they did get the win 35-27 in that game. I have a hard time with what I've seen out of TCU's overall body of work right now, and especially these last 2 games where they've been favored by almost a touchdown or more and losing outright, of laying points with TCU right now. So for me, I'm leaning BYU here in this matchup. What do you think here, Conor Mack? Maybe lean to the over as well in this one. What do you think?
I think you go to the over in this game. TCU back at home. BYU defensively just hasn't, especially on the road, they haven't. BYU hasn't been able to run it. They're just throwing it around. It's like this year. They're just a throw-it team. They haven't been able to run the football. And I think they could do that. TCU was just, awful last week. We touched on it in Iowa State, just a bunch of interceptions in this one. They are at home. And they've been hard to figure out, TCU, after last year, all that great team. And I haven't really wanted to bet on them at all. But I do lean over here in this game, and maybe a little bit to BYU. I doubt I bet it, though.
All right. Next up, Auburn, LSU. We go to the SEC. LSU 11.5 point home favorite, 61.5 the total here in this game. You know me with look, LSU with a point spread cover, they clearly did not deserve, as we talked about against Missouri last week. I'm not laying double digits with this team. The defense is still an absolute mess. They won in spite of it, just because their own offense is so powerful with Jaden Daniels that they can bail out that bad defense. They couldn't do it against Ole Miss, but they were able to do it. And really, they did it against Arkansas, too, where Jaden Daniels and that offense is just so good, they were able to bail out that awful defense. And they did it against Missouri as well in that game, although they did get the pick 6, but that was kind of a forced throw by Brady Cook, backed up in inside his own 20, needing points there at the end. And I wouldn't give LSU's defense too much credit for making that play. Auburn now, they're off a bye week, so it's an advantage for Hugh Freeze, and I definitely like him more than Brian Kelly. I will say that. I'm not saying I'm going to take Auburn here, but you do have to give them some respect for 27-20 against Georgia, losing only by 7, really being right into that game until, Brock Bowers breaks loose and scores that game-winning touchdown with under 3 minutes to go. I mean, Auburn was right there with Georgia a couple weeks ago, so I'm definitely leaning to the Auburn side off a bye week as well. The one concern would be, this is a step down a little bit for this bad LSU. For as bad as the LSU defense is, Auburn's offense isn't as good as Missouri or Ole Miss. So it's going to be a little bit of an easier matchup for this LSU defense, but I still don't trust them. It'll be interesting to see who Hugh Freeze turns to at quarterback here. I think it'll be Peyton Thorne because, he played all right against Georgia. Played well enough that I think he's going to get the opportunity here to start against LSU. So again, Auburn off a bye week. and extra time to prepare with a coach that I think's got a little bit of an advantage because I like Freeze a little bit more than I like Kelly right now. Not saying I'll take Auburn, but I'm at the very least leaning that way. The total's tough because LSU I don't want to bet under. I can't bet LSU under. But
No.
Auburn is not the biggest over team going right now with what we've seen from them early in the season. So it's a little trickier to bet the LSU game over the total like I've done the last couple weeks. But I know I don't want the under. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, LSU with 10 straight overs. I think they've had. I think if it's just low 60s, it could still even get there. That defense is that bad. One thing, LSU, I think, wins at home, and you mentioned it. I want Freeze, not Kelly, as the coach, too. Is I don't lay points. I know even at home here with a bad defense that LSU has, there's just no way this is 12 and a half. The only problem here is Auburn. They don't have that offense. And Peyton Thorne is a thorn in my side. I know he played well, against last week against Georgia, but he can't throw it. He can run, kind of dual threat, but I don't know. Until they figure out a way to throw it, that's the only lone thing here. But I think to be able to run it on the ground in the trenches, they could push LSU around and stay close in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I still got question marks, and it gives Hugh Freeze, an offensive-minded coach, time to design a game plan, with that extra time and off the bye week. That's why I think they could maybe have a better offensive game here against this, like I say, LSU defense that's being scored on by everybody right now when they face them. So, yeah, definitely leaning Auburn, leaning over there in that game. Maybe not as bullish as I've been the last couple of weeks with LSU as far as betting against them in the over, but I'm still leaning that way with this game here. All right, next up, we've got Iowa, Wisconsin to the Big Ten. Wisconsin, 10-point home favorites, 36 the total. This is probably going to be an easy pass for me as far as this one goes. I mean, Wisconsin is still not the team, and there's a reason why I grabbed a little Rutgers, plus 14 against Wisconsin. I don't trust Wisconsin laying big numbers at the moment. The more I watch Tanner Mordecai, the more I'm underwhelmed and unimpressed. That was another pedestrian performance by him in the Wisconsin offense last week. What was he, 17 of 31, only 145 passing yards? That's not great for a quarterback that's been around the block as long as Tanner Mordecai has been, going back to the SMU days. The running game is what's carrying Wisconsin's offense right now. And here's the concern going into this game against Iowa. Iowa's defense against the run is superb. It's the best part of this football team. It's certainly nothing to do with their offense, but their run defense has only given up 3.6 yards per carry, 131 rushing yards per game. And if Wisconsin has trouble running the ball, is Mordecai doing enough throwing the ball to make up for it? Right now, he is not. And so that bothers me about laying 10 with Wisconsin here. But it's Iowa. The thing is, Iowa's defense can hang in there and it'd be 7-0 into the third quarter. And then the Iowa quarterback throws a pick six and they're down by 14. And then they just don't have the offense to get through the back door. That's what you're concerned about taking Iowa here in this game, plus 10 on the road here against the Badgers. An Iowa team that's going to be without – and look, Cade McNamara is not great either, but he's by far the best they had. He's out for the season, and they got to rely on Deacon Hill, who, we've got to see what he can do. But I was not impressed against Purdue last week. 6 for 21. 6 for 21 passing.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. I saw some.
Yeah, pretty bad it was. So, I mean, this is a rock and a hard place. I don't want to lay 10 with Wisconsin, but I don't trust Iowa's offense on the road. Even if the defense hangs in there, one little mistake and pick six or some bad shit from the quarterback, and all of a sudden they're in jeopardy to not cover, and they don't have the offense to get through the back door. So it's a tough game. Maybe under is the best way to go. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Under. We got some rain, wind over 20. I think it might drop even more. This could be 20-7. I don't trust either team. It's like I want to take the points, but they can't score. And Wisconsin just isn't a team really ever that runs it that I want to lay points with. It showed last week. It showed itself in the past. And they've been not good against the number the last few years when they have to lay points like this. So I'm off. Under nothing on the total.
All right, Arkansas and Alabama. As we go back to the SEC, Alabama 19.5-point home favorites, 48.5 being the total here in this game. Arkansas, a valiant effort against Ole Miss, but their offense is starting to concern me a little bit. That's 2 weeks in a row against A&M and Ole Miss that they can't get things going. KJ Jefferson's been, pedestrian, average at best. The run game has been spotty. That's not what I need going into Tuscaloosa. And the one thing about Alabama is that the defense has still been pretty solid. They're not giving up anything on the ground. And this is an Arkansas offense, that has struggled to run the football. So even though they got Raheem Sanders, they've really struggled to run the football. And quite honestly, the passing game hasn't been much better. I'm not saying I'm laying Alabama, but I worry about this. I worry if Arkansas can score enough points to stay in this game. And all of a sudden, don't look now, but Jalen Milroe against Texas A&M last week, and then the week before against Mississippi State, although last week he did it against a pretty good team and a pretty good defense, he's starting to get it going. He's starting to get some confidence. He's starting to get some chemistry with his receivers. That was the best he's looked throwing the football against a really good team and a pretty good defense in A&M last week on the road. I was impressed. I had to upgrade Jalen Milroe as a quarterback following that game against Texas A&M last week. I don't know if I'm going to move on this game as of right now, but I'd be worried about taking even all these points with Arkansas. I'd be worried about their ability to move the football. And I'd also be worried about the improvement we're seeing in the passing game from Jalen Milroe and the Crimson Tide offense. What do you think here, Connor?
Yeah, I just Bama back here at home. I think they get the win. I lean that way. Arkansas, I think they've been flat both sides of the ball. Some of their defensive ranks are okay, but not really. And on offense, they haven't been able to get it done. Obviously, big win on the road, though. Maybe this is a little bit flat for Alabama. And I got to see more, though, from Milroe. I props to him the last couple weeks. But this is a ton of points. This is one I wanted to go through a little bit more through the week.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those where look, I respect Alabama. That was going going on the road against Texas A&M and really having themselves one hell of a really solid offensive performance, especially Jalen Milroe. So when I look at this matchup, to me, yeah, I worry about Arkansas. And like I said,
look at their offensive numbers. Yeah, it's just
that's
awful.
the one thing. Last couple of years, they've been pretty good on offense, Arkansas. They're not that same offense, especially the last couple of weeks. They have struggled. All right, we've got only 4 games left. Georgia, Vanderbilt. Georgia, 31-32 point road favorites, 31.5 to 32 in that range, 57 being the total here in this game. Look, Georgia, finally, and this is what I was worried about all along, and I did take a piece of Kentucky last week, and obviously it was a dead wrong side. You could tell right away when Georgia's going up and down the field against Kentucky that, it's probably going to get away from Kentucky. It did, 51-13. It was finally the complete dominant effort we've been waiting for from Carson Beck and the offense and from this Georgia team, including their defense. Finally, they played a complete football game. And that would concern me if I'm Vanderbilt, who are still, believe it or not, after 7 games, a team that has yet to cover a number, 0-7 now against the spread for Vanderbilt this year, and only 2-5 straight up. Last year, it was 55-0 Georgia. 2 years ago, it was 62-0 for Georgia. That's 117-0 El Skunko for the Vanderbilt the last 2 years against this Georgia team. There's no way I'm taking Brett Andy. And a winless ATS team this year, 31.5 might actually be cheap. Now, what does Georgia have after this game on deck? Let me just take a quick gander here at the schedule. They've got at Florida, they have the cocktail party, but that's actually October 28th. So they have a bye week after this game. Then they have the cocktail party in Jacksonville against Florida, that annual game. So there really isn't a look ahead. And Georgia's finally coming off a game where everything clicked. The offense finally looked explosive. They were able to run the ball better. The defense finally was even more dominant. Not that the defense was bad earlier this season, but that was a dominant defensive game. That's a Georgia defensive type of game. Dominance, which we hadn't always seen this year. Yeah, it's Georgia or pass. Don't know if I'll bet it, but I don't want Vandy. I can tell you that. 117-0 the last 2 years combined for Georgia head-to-head against Vanderbilt. Are they even going to score a point here? I guess you got to ask yourself that, Connor. Vanderbilt.
I don't know. And if they do, I think it's maybe a touchdown, late. I don't know. I think Georgia rolls in this one. I mean, are they a little bit sleepy? We've seen. But Vandy's just shown nothing at all. They're a team I can't even take these points. And they've had like spurts of a quarter, then they just get ripped. The defense gives up like 3 touchdowns, like back to back to back. So that could be this, as they haven't scored a point in a couple of years. So maybe they get a couple points, but Georgia or nothing.
Yeah. I mean, how do you have the guts to take a team, even getting 32 points when they've been outscored 117 to jack shit here the last 2 seasons head to head? I mean, that's an unbelievable degree of dominance for Georgia the last 2 seasons against Vanderbilt. All right, Big 12, Kansas and Oklahoma State. We've got Kansas 3.5-point road favorites, 57 the total in this one. This should be an interesting game. Oklahoma State, give them credit, man. That against Kansas State last week, dominant effort, and really bet a strong game from their defense. That's about as bad as you'll see Will Howard play at quarterback for Kansas State. He was rough in that game, but you do have to credit the Oklahoma State defense. They get a 29-21 win against Kansas State in that game as 11.5-point home underdogs, which tells you that beware this Oklahoma State team as underdogs. Mike Gundy's still got that ability when he's catching points to come up and get you. And that's exactly what they did to Kansas State last week. And credit to the offense. Like Mike Gundy's been playing quarterback musical chairs, quarterback carousel all season long. He's finally settled on Alan Bowman, and Alan Bowman gave him a nice, steady, he didn't light it up, but 235 passing yards, no mistakes, took care of the football, relied on Ollie Gordon II, Jaden Nixon running the ball, which they were able to do against Kansas State. So definitely positive signs for Oklahoma State beating a pretty solid K-State team. Can they keep it going, though, here in this game? They are at home again, facing Kansas, maybe facing Kansas with Jason Bean once again at quarterback, because Jalen Daniels now, he got injured he was out in the Texas game, didn't play against UCF last week, although I find it absolutely hilarious, all the money poured in on UCF in that game. Thinking, Jalen Daniels isn't playing, let's make UCF a road favorite at Kansas, that strong home field, and people acting like Jason Bean is a piece of shit, a piece of crap quarterback. Well, hold on now. I know he struggled against Texas when he came.
Can he hand the ball off?
Yeah, exactly.
He can do that. 400 yards on the ground.
And they ran the ball, and I knew that was an area where they'd be able to have success, run the ball, because UCF doesn't have a great run defense at all this year. And so I just found it was a ridiculous overreaction to make UCF a road favorite at Kansas just because Daniels is out. And sure enough, Kansas rolled them in that game. This will be a little bit more difficult. They're not going to roll up those rushing yards on Oklahoma State's defense. Oklahoma State has given up a respectable, 4.3 yards per carry. The run defense isn't great, but I don't think they're going to run it nearly as well as they did against UCF. I just don't know, though, getting 3.5 with Oklahoma State. And I know Gundy as a dog can be really, really good time to bet him, but I just don't think this gap to me between these two teams is still larger than 3.5. So I'm not saying I'm going to take Kansas, but I'm leaning that way a little bit. And I don't know if Oklahoma State, with the ups and downs I've seen from them, are they capable of 2 good games in a row? Like, that was a terrific game against Kansas State, full marks. Can they do it 2 weeks in a row? I'm not sold they can. So nothing for me as of right now in this game, but I think I would need more than 3.5 to consider the Okie State side. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, I think so too. In this one, Bowman, you didn't make mistakes, which was solid. And I think what Oklahoma State needs again to maybe win outright is those turnovers. Can they get Bean to turn the ball over? But, like last week, he didn't have to. He was 8 of 12 or whatever he was, and he just handed off for 400 yards. It was easy. I still think they'll be able to run it on Oklahoma State. But on the road here, I lean to Gundy a little bit, and I haven't loved this Oklahoma State team all year, but I'm looking that way.
All right, looking toward potentially Oklahoma State. There is a little bit of a strength of schedule advantage for Kansas. Oklahoma State, really their best opponent probably was Kansas State last week for Oklahoma State, where Kansas has played BYU, Texas, UCF. Pretty good teams there, all of them. Illinois was supposed to be good, not so much, but I think a little strength of schedule advantage to Kansas. We'll see if it shows up here, that Kansas really been battle tested here early in the season. All right, next up, we've got Kansas State now, the team that just lost to Oklahoma State last week, taking on Texas Tech. Texas Tech 1-point home favorites, 56.5 the total. Baron Morton, man, he has settled in for the Red Raiders, playing some really good football for them the last couple of weeks. The Houston game and the Baylor game, they're able to move the football very effectively. Can K-State keep it bounce back here, I should say, after the loss to Oklahoma State? I mean, right now I'm leaning to Texas Tech here. It seems like a short price at home. They've had 2 good wins in a row. Now, Baylor and Houston aren't nearly as good as Kansas State, and Kansas State is off a loss. They'll be looking to play better. But I got to admit, K-State on the road has not been anything that I've been impressed with. Missouri, they lose as road favorites at Oklahoma State. They lose outright 29-21. So by default, I think I trust Tech here a little bit. Like I say, I trust their offense. They played really well. The defense has stepped it up. I thought that was a very good defensive effort from Texas Tech. That was a Baylor offense that has Blake Shapen back at quarterback, a Baylor offense that with Blake Shapen back, they scored 36 points in a comeback win against UCF the week before, and Texas Tech shut them down. In fact, I think you can make a case Texas Tech might be slightly better defensively right now than Kansas State, because I've seen Kansas State give up points. You know, even the UCF game, K-State gave up 31. They gave up 29 to an Oklahoma State offense that was pedestrian before last week. They gave up 30 on the road to Missouri. So there are some questions starting to pop up here with the K-State defense. I'm definitely leaning Red Raiders here at around to pick them at home. What do you think, C-Mac?
Yeah, I like how the Red Raiders have been playing. You know, going back to last year, I thought Morton was pretty good, and I'm glad, he's back now, starting, playing well. But I think K-State's going to be pretty rearing to go here against a team they've owned. Beat them 9 of 10. They've had no problem going there and winning. And Will Howard has to be better. But the road problems are real, whether just losing outright, not covering numbers away from Manhattan. Kansas State, it's not the same team. But they've gone to Texas Tech a few times over the last few years and gone there and win. And they're usually been pretty close games. So, and we got just about, pick them -1. So tough one. Lean K-State, I guess.
That is something that can't be ignored here, that Kansas State has absolutely dominated this series history. 9-1 straight up, 7-2.
I was a little shocked.
The last 10 against Texas Tech. Yeah. That's the incredible dominance, but you're right. That is as bad. And I still think Will Howard's good. I don't want to completely rain on his parade for one bad game, but it was a really, really bad game for him against Oklahoma State last week. We'll see if he can turn it around. I'm still leaning Tech, even with that series history going against Texas Tech. I'm still thinking about pulling the trigger on them this week. We'll see if they can get the job done. All right, we wrap it up with our final game for this week's edition of Hitting the Books, and it is a big one. USC Notre Dame. This is going to be your Saturday night NBC game in prime time. Notre Dame 2.5-point home favorites, 60.5 being the total in this game. How about that? Notre Dame favored here at home against USC. And, it's funny. I have a few Notre Dame fans that I know. Jimmy Murphy, who I've done, we used to be on my regular colleague on the Ice Guys show, and he still appears on that show once a week during the NHL season. He's a big Notre Dame fan. He was very upset with the performance against Louisville, saying, what's going on here now? That's 2 losses. Well, look at this schedule. I blame the AD, Jack Swarbrick, here for Notre Dame for agreeing to a schedule like this where you play Ohio State, Duke, and Louisville 3 straight games, including 2 of them back-to-back on the road. That looked like a Notre Dame team to me that just hit the wall. They were gassed. They played Ohio State, which was a down-to-the-wire, tough. They had to exert a lot of energy in that game. The Duke game, down to the wire on the road. They had to really push themselves in that game, and they had to try to, do it again against Louisville. And I think they kind of just wore down. They hit a wall, I think, and I think that's a big part of it. Now, they didn't play well, but I think they were really worn down in that Louisville game. Just a brutally tough schedule, 3 incredibly tough games in a row. And the fact that they were worn down against Louisville last week, I know they're going to be at back home, Notre Dame Stadium. The crowd will be pump them up a little bit for a Saturday night game against a good USC team, but they looked like they were, running on fumes last week. And I worry about that for Notre Dame here in this game. And say what you will about how bad USC's defense can be. But now you're finally getting this team as an underdog, catching points with one of the best offenses and quarterbacks in college football in Caleb Williams. And you know what's funny, Connor, is I was talking about how much he struggled, Caleb Williams, early in the game against Arizona, and they still ended up scoring 43 points, even though that was like well into the second quarter that he struggled in that game. And they still ended up with well over almost 400 total yards of offense. So, it's been one thing for betting against USC this year, and they're 0-3 ATS coming into this game, their last 3 games, but they're 34.5-point favorites against Arizona State, 22.5-point favorites against Colorado, 21.5-point favorites against Arizona. Huge favorites with that shaky, leaky defense that we talk about week in and week out, but this is a totally different point spread range. Now they're plus 2.5. They're getting points. They've got this Heisman candidate quarterback. They've got this explosive offense, the likes of which Notre Dame's defense has not seen this year, outside of maybe Ohio State. And they did play well in that Ohio State game on defense. But I'd say USC throws probably even a greater element of speed and athleticism and explosiveness at them compared to Ohio State. So I'm leaning to the Trojans here in this matchup as a slight dog. Don't know if I'll bet it, but I'm definitely looking at that side. I worry about where Notre Dame's at, not only mentally, but physically. That looked like a worn down, exhausted football team against Louisville on Saturday night. And that's not what I want to see when you're playing this juggernaut, explosive USC offensive attack coming into your place. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, well, they better get up for it this week. SC coming into town, they better get reared up. In this game, that last week against Louisville, Hartman just awful. He finally had one of those games he would have at Wake where he threw 3 picks. They had 2 lost fumbles, 5 turnovers.
Hadn't thrown an interception, Sam Hartman, this season until Saturday. Yep.
He bounces back this week. SC still has a horrible defense. Notre Dame has the way better defense, and it shows up. The game's good. We have bad weather here. Another one, Babano. Wind about 20. 50 degrees, some rain, automatic overs for SC. It still could be. There still could be points, but there is some weather. So look out for that. I know they're laying it short here too, but Notre Dame here, I think they bounce back at home and win this football game. And it's tough because I've been anti-Hartman, and I don't think he's won much of anything. They did get by with Duke.
He made the big run. Sam Hartman, you're putting your faith in him this week. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. It's early. Notre Dame early here. But, yeah, I think he can play a lot better than last week.
And he's going to have to because, look, as good as Notre Dame's defense has been at times this year, you're not shutting down USC's offense completely. That's going to be the thing. And another thing to keep in mind here in this game tonight or Saturday is you're right. This growing problem with Sam Hartman in these big games against the best teams on his schedule. He never won these games at Wake Forest. Clemson always cleaned his clock every year. And he didn't always play great against them. And we see the first step-up game they had against Ohio State, and the offense struggled throughout that game. And I know they survived Duke, but again, if Riley Leonard doesn't get hurt, does Notre Dame win that game? I'm not so sure. And then, of course, Louisville, the offense couldn't get going, and Sam Hartman struggled. So there is that growing concern about whether he's got it in him to play at his best, play well in these big games against these best teams. He's had a good career. There's no doubt overall. Good college career, but for it to go down as a terrific, tremendous, outstanding college football career, he's got to start winning games like this. He has to. So, we'll see how it goes here for Notre Dame, but a very intriguing game. Again, you're right about the weather. Keep an eye on it. Well, that's probably why this total has actually dropped a little bit, 62.5 to 60.5, because of the concerns with potential for rain and wind Saturday night at Notre Dame between these two teams. And it might come down to who can run the football better in this game. And, they do have estimate Notre Dame to be able to run although Marshawn Lloyd's pretty damn good for USC. I mean, you got actually 2 terrific running backs in this game to be quite honest. Looks like Notre Dame is averaging 5 yards per carry, 171 per game on the ground. And then you've got USC run defense giving up 90th in rushing yards per game allowed and 4.2 yards per carry, 78th. How's that Notre Dame run defense? 132.93. So their yards per carry run defense for Notre Dame's a little bit better than USC's, and their 157 rushing yards per game allowed for USC is not as good as Notre Dame's, which is 132.9. The rushing yards they've allowed. So run defense for Notre Dame does look a little better than USC's, and it could be that kind of game if the weather's going to be a problem.
Yeah, that's big. And just on the passing, because the weather too, that's been Notre Dame's strength. That's where they have top numbers, But, they haven't seen Caleb Williams, and we have the weather.
That's right.
Because that's where they've been great, 146 through the air.
I'm still gonna saddle, and again, that doesn't mean I have this. I'm gonna bet USC, but again, Hartman's problem winning these games against the best competition, and now we get USC and this great offense as an underdog. So I'm still leaning that way here with USC. Should be a good Saturday night game though between these two teams. Great stuff. Another amazing show hitting the books, finished for another week. We appreciate everyone in the chat joining us again. Hit the like button on the way out. We appreciate it very much. Make sure you tune into the Monday Night Football live stream for Green Bay Packers, Las Vegas Raiders tonight. It should be a very intriguing game. I will not be on the stream. Usually I am on Monday nights, but I'm off to a Thanksgiving dinner later on. So I'll be back next Monday, though, for Cowboys Chargers, which is the Monday night game next week. But still tune in.
How about them Cowboys?
How about them Cowboys doing what they do, winning those big football games, right? Yeah.
Dak in big games.
Yeah. What a great job by the Niners. Dominance, just better coached, better prepared for that game. The defense was outstanding. Fred Warner was just flying all over the field defensively. It's amazing how good he's playing still at his age for the Niners. The pass rush, their pass rush was there, and did Micah Parsons play last night? Holy shit, I couldn't find him with a telescope.
I know, he was there, but yeah.
Yeah, and then the offense did their thing. Brock Purdy was great. Christian McCaffrey running the ball, and a monster game for here, Kittle. George Kittle, who is absolutely outstanding with the 3 touchdown receptions. So credit to San Francisco. I'll throw out my opinion on the game, actually, because I won't be on the stream tonight. I'm on the Packers tonight. I love this spot for Green Bay. I know Devontae Adams is going to play. He's going to want to beat his old team. I get it, but he's not quite at 100%. I just don't think the Raiders team is that good. Jimmy Garoppolo is going to play. Has he been that good? Bills, he struggled. Steelers game, he struggled. Okay, the Broncos game, he played that okay early in the season, but Denver's defense is horrible. So, and to me, they can't run the football with Jacobs consistently. You can throw the ball. You can run it on that defense of the Raiders. And I think for Green Bay, Thursday night last week at Lambeau against Detroit, they got blown out. It's a bounce-back spot. They have extra time to prepare. I think there's going to be a lot of Packer fans invading Reliant Stadium tonight in Las Vegas. It's going to be cheesehead country. There'll be let's be real, there's going to be a shit ton of Packers fans there. We know they travel. Oh, yeah. It's going to be not so much that strong home field advantage for Las Vegas tonight. I think Green Bay bounces back. I think Green Bay is the better football team, quite honestly, than Las Vegas. So I'm happy to take 2.5 points with them tonight.
Yeah, that's how, a lot of people feel. I think it's like,
Jordan Love will be better than he was last week, too. Even the O-line is concerning for Green Bay. I don't know if Bakhtiari is going to be back or Jenkins is going to be back, but I think Jordan Love will step it up tonight. Vegas defense ain't Detroit's defense. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah, Raiders just do something wild. It's like, and now they got to win by 3. It's different just to pick, like, hey, come on. Yeah. I'll be on props, though.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it should be an interesting Monday nighter, but I'm on Green Bay. There we go. Go, Pack, go. Dun, 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 dun.
You got a cheesehead?
Go, Pack, go. I know. I'm
Razor's good. Razor's
I was going to say, yeah, Razor is going to be thrilled to hear me say that I love his Green Bay Packers tonight. So we'll see how it goes. But, yeah, I like Green Bay here. Bounce back time after that Detroit debacle on Thursday night football. All right.
No, Green Bay hasn't looked good either.
No, they're not. I mean, but they should have beat Atlanta. They actually I thought for 3 quarters they played well against Atlanta, and for some reason they had a bad fourth quarter. And I know their other win was Chicago. I get it. And then the New Orleans as well, that comeback win. So they've been far from great shakes too. I still think if you measure up the rosters And I think Jordan Love long-term is more upside than Jimmy Garoppolo. I still like Green Bay tonight in this game. A shout out to everyone in the chat. Thanks for tuning in. Connor, Mac, let's have some final closing thoughts before we wrap it up.
Yeah, shout out to the chat. We only ask one thing. Hit the like button. That's it. Thanks for joining us. What are we? Week 7. Right? College football is going by. We appreciate you. Andrew G, Rick J, Rants. Shout out to everyone in the green, too. Real Deal Prime, Grinder, Nuke Worker, Daryl Turner. What's up, my dude? Good to see you up in here. EQ, TJ Burks. Shout out to everyone. Join us. Come to the live stream. All that good shit. Appreciate it, Babano. Always have a good time, especially after we go through this on a Monday, my dude.
It's a fun show. I love doing it, even though it's a long show, over 2 hours. We always enjoy it, and we always pack it with tons of insight and analysis to get everyone ready for the week ahead in college football. Shout out to everyone in the chat. Thanks to Jose Bouquet in the background, behind the scenes, for getting the show put together. We'll have the individual game clips posted on the channel later today. And also, don't forget Jimmy and Jimmy the Bag, Troy Torrance tomorrow night with the Bankroll Blitz NFL show Tuesday night. Make sure you tune into that as well. Thanks to everyone for joining us. For CMAC, I'm Ian Cameron. Have a great week. Enjoy the college football action, and we'll see you again next Monday, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, for another edition of Hitting the Books right here on Pub Sports Radio. Class dismissed.